Hello guys, welcome to Pika Fiction. So in this video, we will see, what if Ash's reward for winning the Alola League was a harem of all the island girls? If you enjoy these kinds of stories, don't forget to show us some love by hitting the like button and subscribing to the channel. Your support means the world to us. Now, let's start the story. Chapter 1. The Champion and the Choice. The roar was a physical thing. It wasn't just sound. It was a wave of pressure that vibrated through the soles of Ash's worn sneakers, up his legs, and settled deep in his chest. It was the sound of tens of thousands of people screaming his name, a sound that threatened to dissolve him, to turn him from a boy into a myth right there on the winner's pedestal. Confetti, a blizzard of rainbow paper, rained down from the heavens of the Manalo Stadium, catching in his hair and plastering itself to his sweat-dampened face. He could feel Pikachu, a warm and trembling weight on his shoulder, chirping weakly but triumphantly against his ear. They had done it. After all this time, all the leagues, all the losses that had been lessons in disguise, they had finally, truly done it. He raised the golden trophy, its surface blindingly bright under the Alolan sun. It was heavier than he'd expected, a solid, tangible thing that felt like the culmination of every battle he had ever fought. The crowd's roar intensified, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. He saw them all in a blur of color and motion. Professor Kukui, mask off, tears streaming freely down his face as he applauded. Professor Burnett beside him, her arm wrapped around his, her own smile as wide and bright as the sun itself. He saw Kiawe, his usual stoicism shattered by a fierce, proud grin. He saw Sophocles, pushing his glasses up his nose, his eyes wide with analytical awe. And he saw them, Lily, Mallow, and Lana, standing together near the edge of the field. Mallow was jumping up and down, her green hair bouncing, her hands clasped together as she yelled herself hoarse. Lana, ever her quiet counterpoint, was simply watching him, a small, rare, and incredibly genuine smile on her face. And Lily looked like she was witnessing a miracle. Her hands were pressed to her chest, her eyes shining with an emotion so profound it made Ash's own victory feel somehow more real, more important. He had done this for himself, for his Pokémon, but seeing her face, he knew he had done it for them, too. For the family he had found here in Alola. We did it, buddy, he murmured, his voice raspy, barely audible over the din. He reached up and scratched Pikachu under the chin. Pikachu. The mouse Pokémon squeaked, nuzzling into his cheek, the familiar static crackle a comforting anchor in the dizzying storm of the celebration. The ceremony that followed was a whirlwind. Interviews he could barely process, handshakes from officials whose names he immediately forgot, and flashes from cameras that seemed to explode in his vision. Through it all, he kept his friends in his line of sight. They were his North Star. When it was finally over, when the crowds began to disperse and the crushing weight of public attention lessened, Professor Kukui threw a heavy arm around his shoulders, his laugh booming and full of life. Ash, my boy, you were on fire out there. A true Z move of a final battle. You've made Alola proud. You've made me proud. Thanks, Professor, Ash said, his own grin feeling like it was permanently etched onto his face. We couldn't have done it without you. Nonsense. This was all you. Kukui's expression shifted then, just for a second. The joyous smile tightened, and his eyes flickered towards the stadium entrance where the four kahunas, Hala, Olivia, Nanu, and Hapu, were gathered. They weren't celebrating. They were waiting. Their postures were rigid, their faces impossibly grave. Ash's smile faltered. He had seen that look on their faces before, but only in moments of true crisis, like when the Ultra Beasts had first invaded. Kukui seemed to notice his gaze and forced the jovial tone back into his voice, but the effort was visible. Right. We need to get you all back home for a real celebration. Mallow's family is already firing up the grill at her restaurant. A feast fit for a champion. Mallow, who had just run up with the others, cheered. You bet we are. Sarina and I have been working on a new victory recipe all week. You're going to love it. I can't wait, Ash said, but his eyes were still on the kahunas. Hala met his gaze and gave a slow, deliberate nod. It wasn't a greeting. It was a summons. Professor, Ash said quietly, his voice losing its celebratory edge. What's going on? Kukui's sigh was heavy, all the manufactured cheerfulness deflating out of him like a punctured balloon. He ran a hand through his hair. I was hoping we'd have more time. I was hoping this could wait. He turned to the group, his expression now serious enough to quiet even Mallow's energetic chatter. Ash, Lily, Mallow, Lana, the kahunas need to speak with you. All four of you. The inclusion of the girls was a jarring surprise. Us? Lily asked, her voice small. She instinctively took a half step behind Mallow, a familiar defensive posture that Ash hadn't seen in months. But, why? They will explain, Kukui said, his tone leaving no room for argument. It's important. More important than any Pokemon League. The festive mood evaporated, replaced by a thick, anxious silence. The promise of a victory feast felt like a memory from a different lifetime. Kiave and Sophocles looked on, confused and concerned, but they understood this was a line they couldn't cross. They offered tight nods of support before heading off, promising to keep the party warm. Led by Professor Kukui, Ash and the girls walked across the now emptying stadium floor towards the waiting kahunas. The setting sun cast long, ominous shadows that stretched like grasping fingers from the grandstands. Each step echoed in the cavernous space, a stark contrast to the roar that had filled it only an hour before. Hala, the kahuna of Mele Mele Island, stood at the forefront of the grim-faced council. His usual grandfatherly warmth was gone, replaced by the weight of ancient responsibility. Ash Ketchum, he began, his voice a low rumble that commanded attention. You have accomplished something no one has before. You have become Alola's first true champion. You have proven your strength, your spirit, and your bond with your Pokemon. Thank you, Hala, Ash said, a knot of unease tightening in his stomach. This was more than a formal congratulation. This victory was not just for a title. Olivia, Akala's kahuna, continued, her sharp eyes scanning each of their faces. It was a test. The final part of a trial that has been unknowingly underway since the day you set foot in our region. Nanu, Ulaula's famously lethargic kahuna, was starkly alert, his arms crossed, his gaze piercing. You attracted the attention of the Tapu from the moment you arrived. They have been watching you. All of you. He nodded towards the girls. What do you mean? Mallow asked, her bravery wavering into confusion. What kind of trial? It was Hapu, the youngest and most recently appointed kahuna of Pony Island, who gave them the answer. Her connection to the land was palpable, and her voice carried the grit of the earth itself. A trial to find the one foretold. The one who would stand as Alola's shield against the coming night. She looked directly at Ash, her eyes filled with a heavy, almost sorrowful respect. The trial to find the Sun's champion. The title hung in the air, alien and heavy. Sun's champion. It sounded like something out of one of Sophocles' fantasy shows, not something that applied to him. I don't understand, Ash said. You will, Hala said. But not here. We must go to a place where the veil between worlds is thin. We must go to the ruins of conflict. The journey was a tense, muted affair. They were escorted to a private boat at the marina, a sleek, modern vessel that cut silently through the water as dusk bled into night. The usual vibrant chatter of the group was gone, replaced by the rhythmic slap of waves against the hull and the whisper of the sea breeze. Ash stood at the railing, the heavy trophy now stowed in his bag, feeling like a lead weight. Pikachu was on his shoulder, his ears twitching, sensing the solemnity of their escort. Lily sat on a bench, her hands clasped so tightly her knuckles were white. Ash could see she was holding a familiar object in her lap, the empty, inactive Pokeball that had once housed Nebby, the Cosmog. It was a nervous habit, a touchstone to a time of fear she had fought so hard to overcome. Seeing it reappear now sent a pang of worry through him. Mallow stood near her, a protective arm resting on the back of the bench. She kept trying to project an air of confidence, but her eyes kept darting towards the dark, churning water, a deep crease of worry between her brows. Lana was at the stern, her back to the others, staring out at the ocean's wake as if it were speaking to her. The set of her shoulders was rigid, her stillness more intense than her usual quietude. Professor Kukui and the kahunas remained at the front of the boat, a silent council of elders guiding them towards an unknown fate. As the boat rounded a familiar point of land, Ash saw the silhouette of Mele Mele Island against the star-dusted sky. But they didn't head for Hau'oli City. Instead, they veered towards a secluded, rocky coastline, a place forbidden to casual tourists. The air grew thick, heavy with an unseen energy that made the hairs on Ash's arms stand on end. It was the same feeling he got just before a lightning strike, a palpable static charge that vibrated in his teeth. Pikachu let out a low, nervous growl. They had arrived. The ruins of conflict were even more intimidating at night. The ancient stone structures loomed like sleeping giants under the moonlight, carved with glyphs that seemed to writhe in the flickering torchlight held by their guides. The path was treacherous, winding through dense jungle that fell eerily silent as they approached. There were no chattering Pikapek, no rustling Rattata. The very wildlife of the island seemed to be holding its breath. They entered a massive, circular chamber, open to the sky. A single, monolithic stone totem stood in the center, its surface worn smooth by centuries of wind and rain. Hala led them to the middle of the chamber and then turned, his face a mask of grim ceremony. Here, he said, his voice echoing in the stone arena, Tapu Koko first tested you, Ash. It has chosen this place to reveal why. As if summoned by his words, a sound ripped through the night, a sharp, piercing cry that was part bird, part lightning strike. A flash of brilliant yellow light exploded from above. Tapu Koko materialized in the air before them, its warrior's body crackling with raw, untamed electricity. Its shield-like arms were closed, its gaze intense and unreadable. Before anyone could react, another cry answered it, this one more melodic, almost whimsical, yet carrying an undercurrent of immense power. A wave of pink psychic energy washed over them, and Tapu Lele floated down, scattering a glowing, restorative dust that seemed to make the very air hum with life. From the dark jungle beyond the ruins came a deep, resonant bellow, the sound of ancient wood groaning and the earth itself shifting. The ground trembled as Tapu Bulu emerged, its massive form more a part of the landscape than a creature upon it. The scent of rich loam and fresh blossoms filled the chamber. Finally, from a pool of water at the chamber's edge that Ash hadn't even noticed, a serene, sorrowful song arose. The water began to glow with a soft, purple light, and Tapu Fini ascended, encased in a mist of its own making, its eyes holding the wisdom and sadness of the ocean depths. All 4 island guardians were here. Together. The sheer pressure of their combined presence was staggering. It was hard to breathe, hard to think. Ash felt like a tiny insect in a room full of gods. He instinctively moved to stand slightly in front of the girls, a protective gesture that was as natural to him as breathing. A voice entered their minds. It was not spoken aloud, but it was clear as a bell, ancient and powerful. It was the collective will of the Tapu, though the stern, commanding tone felt primarily like Tapu Koko. The champion has been crowned. The prophecy is fulfilled. Prophecy. Lily whispered, her voice trembling. Alola is a land of light, the voice continued, ignoring her. But it exists in a cycle. Where there is great light, a great shadow is inevitably cast. Long ago, an entity of immense hunger arose. A being that did not conquer, but consumed. It devours light, life, and spirit. It was defeated, sealed away by the champions of our time, but its seal weakens. It stirs once more. Images flooded their minds, unbidden. A vision of a creeping, silent darkness spreading across Alola's vibrant islands, turning lush forests to gray dust and sparkling oceans to black, stagnant sludge. They saw people, their faces vibrant and full of life, suddenly becoming hollow-eyed, their light extinguished. The vision was so potent, so horrifying, that Mallow let out a small cry and Lily stumbled back, her face pale. The Pokemon League was a tool, the voice explained, the vision fading, leaving a cold dread in its wake. A modern ritual to find souls strong enough, spirits bright enough, to stand against the coming night. To find the new champions. The Tapu moved. Tapu Koko floated directly before Ash. Its golden shell opened, revealing its fierce, warrior's gaze. You, Ash Ketchum. Your spirit burns with the fire of the sun. Your bond with your Pokemon is a beacon. You are the chosen of Koko. You are the sun's champion. A bolt of pure, white-hot electricity, more brilliant than any thunderbolt, leapt from Tapu Koko and struck Ash square in the chest. He cried out, not in pain, but in sheer, overwhelming shock. It didn't burn. It felt like being filled with the power of a raging storm, a billion volts of energy surging through every cell in his body. He fell to one knee, gasping, as a glowing, intricate symbol, like a stylized sun combined with Tapu Koko's crest, blazed into existence on the back of his right hand, shining through his glove before fading to a faint, silvery mark. He looked up, panting, his mind reeling. Before he could process what had happened to him, the other three Tapu moved towards the girls. Tapu Lele hovered before a terrified Lily. You, who learned to conquer fear and shine your own light. You are the chosen of Lele. You are the guardian of the mind. A pulse of soft, pink energy flowed from Tapu Lele and enveloped Lily. She gasped, her eyes widening as a warm, soothing power spread through her. A mark like a delicate, stylized butterfly wing appeared on her wrist, glowing with a gentle, pearlescent light. Tapu Bulu stood before Mallow, its massive presence radiating a calm, unshakable strength. You, whose heart is bound to the life of the land. You are the chosen of Bulu. You are the guardian of the body. A thick, green vine of pure energy, glowing with life, snaked out from Tapu Bulu and gently wrapped around Mallow's arm. She flinched but did not pull away. The energy sank into her, and a mark resembling a flowering bud appeared on her shoulder. Finally, Tapu Fini floated before Lana, its sad eyes meeting her calm ones. You, who understands the depths, the patience, and the fury of the sea. You are the chosen of Fini. You are the guardian of the spirit. A swirling orb of purified water lifted from Tapu Fini's shell and merged with Lana's chest. She didn't even flinch, simply closing her eyes as if accepting a long-expected truth. A mark shaped like a cresting wave appeared just above her heart. The four of them stood there, marked, changed. The air crackled with their newfound, untamed power. The sun's champion cannot stand alone, the voice of the Tapu declared. He is the sword. But a sword needs a shield, a foundation, and a current to guide it. You are four parts of a single whole. Your fates, your very souls, are now intertwined. United, you are Alola's only hope. The weight of their words crashed down on them. This wasn't a choice. It wasn't an offer. It was a decree, handed down by the gods of the islands. Ash looked at the silvery mark on his hand. He felt the storm still churning inside him, a wild power that listened to his heartbeat. He thought of the vision of darkness, of the hollowed-out faces. He thought of his friends, his Pokémon, of the home he had come to love more than any other. There was no hesitation. He pushed himself back to his feet, his legs shaking but his resolve solid as stone. I'll do it, he said, his voice clear and steady. I accept. I'll protect Alola. Mallow was the next to react. She clenched her fist, the flowery mark on her shoulder pulsing with a soft green light. This is my home. My family is here. Of course, I'll fight. Her fear was still there, but her determination burned brighter. Lana simply nodded, her hand resting over the mark on her chest. Her expression was serene, certain. For her, there had never been another option. But Lily was frozen. Her eyes were wide with a familiar, haunted terror. A destiny forced upon her. A power she didn't ask for. A role she was being compelled to play. It was all so horribly similar to her mother's obsession, her life in a gilded cage, being molded into something she wasn't. She shook her head, taking a step back, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. No, I can't, she stammered. I just got my freedom. I can't be chosen. I can't be someone's guardian. The Tapu remained silent, their judgment absolute. They had made their choice. Whether she accepted it or not was irrelevant. Ash saw the sheer panic in her eyes and took a step towards her, but Hala put a firm hand on his shoulder. This is a burden each must accept on their own, the Kahuna said softly. The mark has been made. The path is set. The island guardians, their pronouncement delivered, began to fade, their forms dissolving back into light, energy, and mist, leaving the four chosen teenagers standing alone in the center of the ancient ruins, forever bound by a fate they were only just beginning to comprehend. The roar of the stadium crowd felt a million miles away. The life of a Pokémon trainer was over. The life of a champion had just begun, and it was already heavier than any trophy. Far away, in a sterile, white room deep within a hidden annex of Ether Paradise, a man watched a series of monitors. His uniform was a stark, militaristic gray, a modified version of the Ether Foundation design, but stripped of all its gentle, conservationist pretenses. His name was Kratos, and he had been appointed sub-director to clean up the mess Lusamine had left behind. But his ambitions went far beyond simple administration. On the main screen, a topographical map of Mele Mele Island was displayed. A section glowed with an angry, pulsating red. Massive energy surge detected. Director, a technician reported, his voice clipped and professional. Origin point. The ruins of conflict. The readings are off the scale. The signature is consistent with all 4 tapu, but amplified, exponentially. Kratos steepled his fingers, a thin, cruel smile touching his lips. He had been monitoring the new champion, the boy from Kanto. He had seen the potential, the dangerous, chaotic power that clung to him like a second skin. He had predicted this. The old gods were making a move. They're anointing their pawns, he said, more to himself than to his subordinate. He believed in order, in progress, in the power of human ingenuity to tame the chaotic, dangerous forces of the world. And there was no force more chaotic than the so-called deities that the people of Alola worshipped like children clinging to fairy tales. They were biological anomalies, powerful and unpredictable, and therefore, they were a threat to his vision of a safe, controlled world. The subjects of interest were all present, the technician added, pulling up satellite imagery. The champion, Ketchum, and 3 female associates, Lily Ether, Malo Vodello, and Lana Swearin. The 4 variables, Kratos mused. It seems the old prophecy was more than just a myth. He stood, his shadow falling long across the control room. His gaze was cold, pragmatic, like a surgeon preparing to excise a tumor. Sir. Kratos turned, his eyes gleaming with intellectual fervor and absolute resolve. The age of myth is over. Humanity can no longer afford to be held hostage by the whims of these creatures. This new power they've unleashed, it's a disease. And we are the cure. He pressed a button on his console, opening a communications channel to a hidden fleet of aircraft and submarines across the region. Deploy the wardens. All units. Our targets have been confirmed. Secure the assets. Use any means necessary. Chapter 1 end. Chapter 2. The weight of the mark. The return from the ruins of conflict was a journey through a dreamscape. The world outside the silent, speeding boat seemed distant and unreal, a watercolor painting of moon and sea. Inside the cabin, the 4 of them sat in a strained, humming silence, each lost in the private universe of their own transformation. Ash kept clenching and unclenching his right hand, the faint, silvery mark of the sun crest a phantom warmth against his skin. He felt full, overloaded. A constant, low-level thrum of energy coursed through him, a river of power that had been diverted to flow directly through his heart. It was exhilarating and terrifying in equal measure. He could feel Pikachu on his lap, not just the familiar weight and warmth, but the very spark of his life force, a tiny, crackling star in the vast new sensory landscape that had opened up within him. Lily had retreated so far into herself she seemed almost translucent under the cabin's soft lights. She stared at the delicate butterfly wing mark on her wrist as if it were a venomous snake poised to strike. For her, the power was not a gift. It was a brand, a chain linking her to a destiny she had not chosen. Every warm pulse of energy that emanated from the mark felt like the closing of a cage door. Mallow, by contrast, was a study in restless energy. She kept touching the floral bud on her shoulder through her shirt, a bewildered expression on her face. She'd extend her fingers and stare at them, then clench them into a fist, as if expecting leaves to sprout from her knuckles. The power within her felt like a seed on the verge of a violent, explosive bloom, and she had no idea how to contain it. Lana remained the calm center of their storm. She sat with her eyes closed, her hand resting over the wave crest mark on her chest. Her breathing was slow and even, her posture one of meditation. She was not fighting the change, nor was she embracing it. She was simply listening to it, attuning herself to the new rhythm it had introduced into the song of her soul, the deep and patient cadence of the tide. Professor Kukui and the Kahunas had explained the immediate plan. The world could not know the truth, not yet. To everyone else, Ash was the new champion, and his friends were celebrating with him. They needed a secure, private location to understand, and hopefully control, what had been done to them. The only logical place was Ether Paradise. With Lusamine gone and Gladion now at its helm, the Foundation was being reformed, its vast resources redirected towards legitimate conservation and research. More importantly, it was a fortress, isolated and defensible. Gladian was waiting for them on the main dock when their boat arrived, his arms crossed, Silvally a silent, powerful sentinel at his side. His usual scowl was etched deeper than ever, his gaze sharp as he took in the four of them, lingering for a moment on his sister. He had been briefed by the kahunas. He understood the stakes. So it's true, he said, his voice low. He didn't sound pleased or awed, merely grimly accepting of a terrible new reality. The old stories weren't just for tourists. Gladian, Lily began, her voice barely a whisper. He held up a hand, cutting her off. Not here. He turned and led the way, his long strides forcing them to hurry to keep up. I've cleared out the entire residential wing. Top-level security protocols are in effect. No one gets in or out without my direct authorization. As far as the staff knows, you are here for a private, extended celebration. A reward for the new champion and his entourage. The word, entourage, was delivered with a faint, sardonic curl of his lip. They were taken to a sprawling, luxurious suite of interconnected rooms, with a central common area that boasted a panoramic view of the moonlit ocean and the conservation area below. It was beautiful, sterile, and felt utterly alien. A prison of glass and chrome. For the next 2 days, they tried to live in the strange new skin of their power. Gladian had given them access to a private training deck, a massive, state-of-the-art facility designed for Pokemon battles, now repurposed for them. It was a place of jarring, chaotic discovery. Mallow's trial came first. Standing in the center of the empty field, she tried to focus on the power humming beneath her skin. Okay, she said, taking a deep breath. The kahunas said we need to learn control. So, let's just try something small. She held out her hand towards a small, decorative planter box at the edge of the deck. Maybe I can make the flowers bloom a little brighter. She concentrated, channeling the feeling of vibrant, green energy she felt welling up from the mark on her shoulder. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, the flowers in the box began to glow with an intense, emerald light. It's working, she gasped. But it didn't stop. The glow intensified, and the small petunias began to grow, their stems thickening, their leaves expanding at a visible rate. They writhed, twisting into thick, thorny vines that burst from the confines of the planter, cracking the ceramic. The vines snaked across the floor, growing with ferocious speed, sprouting massive, exotic-looking flowers that bloomed and withered in the space of a second. Within 30 seconds, a quarter of the training deck was covered in a writhing, alien jungle. Mallow, stop, Ash yelled, but she was pale with panic. I can't, she cried, her hands shaking. It's not listening. It was Lana who acted. With a calm, focused expression, she walked to the edge of the deck, where a decorative waterfall cascaded into a large pool. She raised her hands. The waterfall stopped. The entire mass of water hung suspended in the air, shimmering like a sheet of liquid crystal. With a sharp, downward gesture, she sent the water crashing down onto the rampaging plants, a localized tsunami that flattened the unnatural growth under tons of pressure. The vines hissed and recoiled, and Mallow, the connection suddenly severed, collapsed to her knees, breathing heavily. Lana herself swayed, a hand pressed to her head. It's loud, she murmured, referring to the feeling of so much water under her command. It's hard to focus on just one part of it. Lily watched all of this with wide, terrified eyes. Control. They were supposed to learn control, but this looked like pure, world-breaking chaos. Lily, your turn, Ash said gently, trying to keep his voice encouraging. Just try to make a barrier. Like a small one. She shook her head, backing away. No, I don't want to. You have to. Gladian's voice cut in, sharp and uncompromising from the sidelines where he observed with the kahunas. You think our enemies are going to care if you want or not? Try it. Her brother's harsh tone had the opposite effect. Trembling, Lily raised her hands. She squeezed her eyes shut and thought of safety, of protection. A faint, shimmering wall of pearlescent light flickered into existence in front of her. It was barely a foot wide and seemed as fragile as a soap bubble. Good, Ash said. See, you can do it. But then she remembered the vision in the ruins. The creeping darkness. Her mother's crazed eyes. Kratos's face, which she'd seen on the news, his cold, dismissive smirk. Her fear spiked, and the light barrier reacted instantly. It flared violently, expanding into a massive, jagged shield that pulsed with uncontrolled energy. It shot forward, not as a wall, but as a wave of force, slamming into a row of training dummies and blasting them into shrapnel. The light then imploded, shattering with the sound of 1,000 breaking windows, and Lily cried out, clutching her head as a psychic backlash washed over her. Ash was at her side in an instant. Hey, it's okay. It's okay. It's not okay, she sobbed, her carefully constructed composure finally crumbling. None of this is okay. I'm not a warrior. I'm not a guardian. I'm just me, and I'm scared. Ash looked at her, at the genuine terror in her eyes. He saw Mallow, still trying to catch her breath, and Lana, looking out at the ocean with a deep, troubled frown. He felt the storm of power inside himself, a power he had no idea how to wield. And for the first time since leaving the ruins, he let his own fear surface. He knelt in front of Lily, forcing her to meet his gaze. Me too, he said, his voice quiet but firm. I'm scared too, Lily. She stared at him, her tears stopping in surprise. You are. Of course I am, he admitted. It's huge. It's not like a Pokemon battle where you can just try your best and if you lose, you try again tomorrow. The Tapu showed us what would happen if we lose. I don't want that to happen. I don't want anything to happen to you. Or Mallow, or Lana, or anyone. He took a breath, the confession making him feel strangely lighter. But being scared doesn't mean we stop. It just means we have to be brave enough to do it anyway. Together. Lily looked at him, at the honesty and vulnerability in his eyes. It was the same look he'd had in the conservatory all those months ago, the look that told her she wasn't alone. A fragile, watery smile touched her lips. Together, she echoed softly. It was a small moment, but it felt like the first real piece of solid ground they had found since their world had been turned upside down. The moment was shattered by a piercing alarm that blared through the ether paradise. A cold, synthesized female voice echoed from the PA system. Warning. Unauthorized vessels approaching. Security perimeter breached. This is not a drill. Gladian was already moving, tapping furiously at a wrist-mounted communicator. Report. How did they get past the outer sensors? They didn't, sir, a panicked voice replied over the comm. They just appeared. 5 of them. Unmarked. They're deploying troops on the main dock. The wardens, Hala said, his voice a low growl. The kahunas moved to the edge of the training deck, their faces grim. Get inside. Gladian ordered Ash and the girls. The suite is a fortified safe room. Silvally and I will hold them off. No, Ash said, getting to his feet. He helped Lily up. The fear was still there, a cold knot in his stomach, but his conversation with her had solidified something within him. His purpose. We're not hiding. We're the reason they're here. We have to face them. He's right, Mallow said, her expression hardening with resolve. Lana was already by their side, her silent presence a firm vote of agreement. Before Gladian could argue, the doors to the training deck burst open. A squad of soldiers in sleek, gray and white armor stormed in. They weren't carrying standard weapons. Their rifles hummed with a strange, blue energy, and they moved with a chilling, synchronized efficiency. At their head was Kratos, his face impassive, his eyes sweeping over the group with the detached curiosity of a scientist studying insects. Ash Ketchum. The new champion, Kratos said, his voice calm and resonant, amplified slightly by his helmet. And his guardians. A fascinating mythological convergence. I am Director Kratos of the Ethereum Wardens. You are all to come with me. You represent an unacceptable threat to regional stability. The only threat here is you, Kratos, Hala boomed, stepping forward, his Hariyama materializing from its Pokeball with a thunderous crash. Kratos completely ignored him. His focus was solely on Ash and the girls. Your new abilities are nothing more than chaotic, biological anomalies. Uncontrolled. Unstable. We have the means to contain you. To help you. Cooperate. And you will not be harmed. We're not going anywhere with you, Ash snarled, stepping in front of his friends. Pikachu's cheeks sparked with furious electricity. Pikachu. Thunderbolt. The bolt of lightning that erupted from Pikachu was immense, far larger and more powerful than usual, supercharged by the ambient energy pouring off Ash. It screamed across the deck, a spear of pure yellow energy. Kratos didn't even flinch. Two of his wardens stepped forward, raising their rifles. The weapons projected a shimmering, translucent blue field. Pikachu's thunderbolt slammed into the field and simply vanished. It didn't explode, it was absorbed, dissipated without a trace. As I said, Kratos stated coolly. Uncontrolled. Aura dampening technology. Quite effective. The wardens opened fire. They didn't shoot lasers or bullets. They fired wide, concussive rings of the same blue energy. Ash and the others scattered. Mallow. Now, Ash yelled. Mallow slammed her hands on the deck. Take them down. The vines from her earlier accident, which had been crushed by Lana's water, erupted back to life. They shot towards the wardens, a wall of thorny tendrils. The wardens simply altered their fire, the blue rings striking the vines. Wherever the energy touched, the plants withered instantly, turning black and crumbling to dust. Mallow cried out as if she'd been struck herself, a phantom pain lancing up her arm from the severed connection. Lana thrust her hands forward, pulling a massive wave of water from the pool. It crested, forming a serpentine dragon of roaring water that lunged at the wardens. But again, they fired into it. The blue energy rings didn't stop the water, but they destabilized her control. The water dragon dissolved into a chaotic, directionless splash that drenched everyone and everything, losing all its force. Lana stumbled, clutching her head as the feedback shrieked through her mind. This was a nightmare. Their powers, their greatest strength, were being systematically turned against them, used as targets to cripple them. Fall back. To the elevator. Gladion shouted, he and Silvally fighting a desperate battle against another squad that had appeared behind them. Lily, we need a shield. Ash yelled, seeing wardens closing in on them from all sides. Tears of frustration and fear streamed down Lily's face, but she held her hands up. A wall of light flickered into existence between them and Kratos. It was brighter this time, stronger, fueled by her desperation to protect her friends. Kratos watched it, a flicker of genuine interest in his eyes. Remarkable. Pure psychic energy given tangible form. He raised his own weapon, a pistol-like device that glowed with a more intense, violet light. But all energy has a frequency. And all frequencies can be matched. He fired. A thin beam of violet light struck Lily's shield. It didn't break it. It made it resonate. The shield began to hum, the pitch rising higher and higher until it was a physical pain in their ears. Lily screamed, her hands flying to her head as her own power was turned into an instrument of torture, the psychic feedback threatening to tear her mind apart. The shield shattered. The wardens surged forward. It was over. They were surrounded, outmaneuvered, their powers useless. They had lost. Suddenly, a massive shape dropped from the sky, landing with a ground-shaking impact that cracked the deck tiles. Tapu Koko. Its shell was closed, and it radiated an aura of pure, unadulterated fury. It let out a piercing war cry and charged, a blur of yellow and black. Kratos' soldiers were ready. They formed a firing line and unleashed a volley of dampening rings directly at the Guardian. The energy slammed into Tapu Koko, causing it to cry out in pain and stagger back, its electrical field sputtering violently. Even an island deity was vulnerable to their technology. But it wasn't a solitary attack. It was a diversion. Now, Hala roared. He and the other three kahunas unleashed their Pokémon in a coordinated, last-ditch assault. Hariyama, Lycanroc, Crocodile, and Mudsdale charged from the other side, a wave of raw, physical power that had nothing to do with fancy auras. The attack was designed not to win, but to create an opening. Go. Get to the docks. Take my boat. Kukui yelled, shoving Ash towards the emergency exit. We'll hold them here. Get out of sight. Get to the wild. Now, Ash, go. Ash hesitated, his fists clenched. He hated running. But he looked at Lily, who was being supported by Mallow, both of them pale and shaking. He saw Lana, her face grim, a trickle of blood coming from her nose from the mental strain. They couldn't win this fight. Not now. Not like this. He made the only choice he could. Come on. He yelled, grabbing Lily's free arm and pulling her along. They ran, the sounds of the desperate battle between the kahunas and the wardens echoing behind them. They made it to the docks just as Kratos' voice, amplified and chillingly calm, boomed across the entire island complex. Attention all Ether personnel. The fugitives are escaping. They are armed, dangerous, and mentally unstable. The champion, Ash Ketchum, is to be considered the primary threat, a rogue element who has taken the Ether Heiress hostage. Subdue them on sight. They scrambled onto Kukui's boat, the words hitting them like physical blows. Hostage. Rogue element. Fugitives. In the space of 5 minutes, they had gone from heroes to villains in their own home. Ash gunned the engine, the boat lurching away from the dock and speeding out into the open ocean, leaving the gleaming prison of Ether Paradise behind. He didn't know where they were going. He only knew they had to run. They were alone, hunted, and their own power was a weapon that could be used against them. The weight of the mark on his hand had never felt heavier. Chapter 2 End. Chapter 3. The Trial of Tides and Trust. The flight from Ether Paradise was a desperate, salt-sprayed blur. Ash kept the throttle of Kukui's boat pushed to its maximum, the engine screaming in protest as they slammed against the waves, carving a white gash in the dark fabric of the ocean. Behind them, the lights of the floating fortress dwindled, but the chilling pronouncements of Director Kratos echoed in their minds, a poison more potent than any they had faced before. Fugitives. Rogue element. Hostage. The adrenaline that had fueled their escape began to curdle into a cold, heavy dread as the hours wore on. The sun rose, painting the sky in mocking shades of pink and gold, revealing their terrifying isolation. They were 4 teenagers in a small boat in the middle of a vast ocean, with the most powerful military force in Alola hunting them. "We need to find a place to land," Ash said, his voice raw from the wind and tension. He scanned the horizon. Mele Mele Island was a familiar green smudge in the distance. "We can't stay out here. We're too exposed." "Land where?" Ash. Mallow retorted, her voice sharp with exhaustion and frayed nerves. She was huddled on one of the benches, arms wrapped around herself. "Hau'oli City. Our homes. They'll be watching. Kratos has probably plastered our faces on every screen in Alola by now." "I know that, Mallow, but we have to do something." He shot back, his own control slipping. The weight of leadership was a physical pressure on his shoulders. "We're almost out of fuel." "He's right," Lily said softly. She looked even worse than the others, pale and drawn, the psychic backlash from the battle having left her with a splitting headache. "Arguing won't help. We need a plan." But they had no plan. They had only the clothes on their backs, their Pokémon, and a terrible, volatile power they couldn't control. The silence that fell was heavier than their argument had been, filled with the unspoken fear that they were already beaten. It was Lana who broke it. She had been standing at the prow the entire time, her small frame rigid against the wind, her eyes fixed on the distant coastline. She hadn't said a word for hours. "There," she said, her voice quiet but clear, cutting through the engine's roar. She pointed to a section of the coast far from the city, a rugged stretch of cliffs and dense jungle. "Steer that way. The western shore." Ash looked at her, then at the cliffs. "What's there?" "A blind spot," she said, turning to face them. Her eyes, usually so calm and placid, now held a glint of hard, focused steel. "The currents are dangerous. The rocks are sharp. No one lands boats there. But I know a way through. A channel that isn't on any map." There was no hesitation in her voice, no room for doubt. It was the most authoritative Ash had ever heard her be. He looked at Mallow and Lily, who seemed just as surprised, then back at Lana. He saw a deep, intrinsic knowledge in her gaze, the certainty of someone who knew the ocean not from charts, but from instinct. He nodded, turning the boat's wheel. "Tell me where to go." Navigating the hidden channel was a masterclass in tension. Under Lana's clipped, precise instructions, "Left, now. Hard. Wait for the third wave, then forward." Ash maneuvered the boat through a maze of jagged, sea-worn rocks that would have torn the hull to shreds. Waves crashed over the bow, drenching them, but Lana's guidance was flawless. Finally, they slipped through a narrow opening in the cliff face and found themselves in a place that felt like it belonged to a forgotten age. It was a perfectly circular cove, hidden from the sea and the sky by the towering cliffs that encircled it. A waterfall cascaded down one side, feeding a crystal-clear lagoon. A small, sandy beach gave way to a thick, untouched jungle. The air was still and quiet, the only sounds the waterfall and the gentle lapping of the lagoon's water. It was a sanctuary. As soon as Ash cut the engine, the sudden silence was overwhelming. For a moment, they could only stand there, breathing in the clean, untainted air. How did you know about this place? Lily asked in awe. My family has known for generations, Lana replied, hopping nimbly from the boat into the shallow water. It is a place of peace. A place to think. She turned to face them, her expression deadly serious. And a place to train. The next few days were the hardest they had ever endured. Lana, in this secluded domain, became their reluctant drill instructor. Her methods were nothing like the explosive trials at Ether Paradise. They were about discipline, focus, and a brutal, unflinching introspection. Your power is not a weapon, Ash, she told him on the first morning, as he tried and failed to summon a controlled spark of energy from the mark on his hand. He kept producing jarring, uncontrolled bursts that fizzled out instantly. It is a part of you. You cannot command it. You must listen to it. She made him sit on the beach for hours, his legs crossed, eyes closed, and simply breathe. She told him to feel the sun on his skin, the sand beneath him, the thrum of the island, and to find the storm inside himself and feel its rhythm, not fight its rage. For someone as action-oriented as Ash, it was a unique form of torture. For Mallow, the training was even more frustrating. Lana took her to a single, ancient banyan tree at the edge of the jungle. Don't try to command the forest, Lana instructed. That is Tapu Bulu's voice. You are its guardian. Your job is to feel its breath. She made Mallow place her hands on the rough bark. Feel one root. Follow it into the earth. Feel one leaf. Follow it to the sun. Do not ask for anything. Just listen. Mallow, used to explosive growth and vibrant energy, struggled against the sheer passivity of the task, her power bubbling under her skin like a pot about to boil over. Lily's training was the most delicate. Lana took her to the waterfall. Your light is tied to your emotions, she said, her voice softening slightly. When you are scared, it is a weapon. When you are calm, it is a shield. You must learn to find your calm in the heart of your fear. She instructed Lily to create the smallest possible sphere of light in her palm and hold it steady. Do not think of the wardens. Do not think of your mother. Think of us. Think of this place. Hold the light. Let it be a candle, not a wildfire. The sphere would flicker and flare with every intrusive thought, every spike of anxiety, and Lily would have to start over, her frustration mounting with each failure. This isn't working, Lana. Mallow finally exploded on the third day, storming away from her tree. Sitting around and thinking isn't going to help us fight Kratos. We need to be practicing our moves, getting stronger. Raw power is what made us lose, Lana said, her voice uncharacteristically sharp. She was standing waist deep in the lagoon, her eyes closed, water swirling gently around her. Their technology turns our strength into a weakness. They expect us to lash out. They are counting on us to be predictable. We will not be. But they're out there hunting us. Ash argued, breaking his meditation. The frustration was getting to him, too. We're sitting here while our friends, our families, are in danger. We are in no condition to protect anyone, Lana stated, opening her eyes. The water around her stilled instantly. Not until we can protect ourselves from our own power. We will continue. Her resolve was absolute, a sheer cliff face against which their frustrations crashed and broke. Reluctantly, they went back to their tasks. But a seed of doubt had been planted. Was this really the right way? Their answer came on the fifth day. It began subtly. A pair of Magikarp washed up on the beach, gasping and pale. Then a tentacle, its tentacles listless. Soon, the edge of their pristine lagoon was littered with sick and dying Pokémon, all fleeing from the open ocean. Lana was the first to the water's edge, her face a mask of horror. She knelt, dipping her hand into the waves that lapped at the entrance of the cove. She recoiled as if burned. It's wrong, she whispered, her voice trembling. The water, it feels sick. It's cold. Ash and the others joined her. Peering out through the narrow channel, they could see it. The vibrant blue of the Alolan Sea was tainted. A murky, greenish-brown slick was spreading from further up the coast, a visible stain upon the ocean. It was poison. The wardens, Ash breathed, a cold fury rising in him. They're not trying to find us, Mallow realized, her eyes wide with horror. They're trying to draw something out. They're attacking the island itself to get to Tapu Fini. Suddenly, a shape broke the surface far out at sea. It was colossal, a sleek, gray behemoth of metal that rose from the depths like a leviathan. A submarine, easily as large as the entire Ether Paradise research wing, its surface bristling with antennae and what looked like weapon emplacements. It was the source of the poison. Lana stared at it, her hands clenched into fists, her knuckles white. The guardian of the spirit was watching her domain be desecrated, its creatures choked and killed. A deep, primal anger rose in her, so powerful it was a visible force. The water in the lagoon began to churn, rising and frothing as if boiling. Lana, Ash shouted, placing a hand on her shoulder. Calm down. Don't just lash out. He was using her own words against her, a desperate plea. She took a shuddering breath, forcing the water to subside, but the fury in her eyes remained. They will not kill the sea, she said, her voice a low, dangerous promise. We have to stop them. How? Mallow asked, gesturing helplessly towards the monstrous submarine. We can't even get close to it. We have to cleanse the water, Lana said, her mind already working. But if I focus on that, I'll be completely exposed. And the poison, feeling all of that sickness at once, she trailed off, her face pale. They'll have patrols, Ash reasoned, his strategic mind kicking in. They know Tapu Fini or its guardian will respond. They'll have troops on the beaches, waiting for us. This was her trial, her dilemma. She could attempt a focused, powerful strike against the submarine itself, a risky move that might fail and would certainly expose them. Or she could try to cleanse the water, an immense undertaking that would leave her and the others vulnerable to a direct attack from land. She looked at Ash, her eyes filled with the terrible weight of the choice. She was the expert here. This was her domain. But she couldn't do it alone. Ash saw the conflict in her face. He remembered his promise to Lily. Together. He remembered Lana's patient, frustrating lessons. Listen, don't command. He looked at the beached, dying Pokemon, at the poison slick spreading like a plague. He looked at the steel in Lana's eyes. His decision was instant. Tell us what to do, he said, his voice ringing with a conviction that startled even himself. Mallow looked at him, shocked. Ash, we don't even know what she's planning. It doesn't matter, Ash said, his gaze locked on Lana. This is her battle. We're her support. I trust you, Lana. Completely. That declaration, so simple and so absolute, seemed to solidify something in Lana. The last flicker of doubt in her eyes vanished, replaced by a crystalline resolve. Lily, she said, her voice steady. When I connect to the ocean, the pain from the poison will be overwhelming. I need you to shield my mind. Keep me anchored. Lily, who had been watching in silent horror, nodded, her face determined. The days of practicing with her small, controlled light suddenly had a purpose. Ash, Mallow, Lana continued. You were right. They will have soldiers on the land. They will come for us. You, your Pokemon, you have to hold them off. No matter what. We'll give you all the time you need, Mallow said, her earlier frustration replaced by a fierce loyalty. Sarina materialized beside her, ready for a fight. Ash nodded, unclipping Pikachu's Pokeball, though the little mouse was already on his shoulder, cheeks sparking. They won't get near you. The plan was set. Lana waded out into the lagoon, towards the channel that led to the open sea. Lily followed, stopping at the water's edge. Ash and Mallow took up defensive positions on the beach, their Pokemon forming a front line. Lana closed her eyes. Now, Lily. Lily raised her hands. She didn't create a wall. She projected a soft, gentle aura of pearlescent light that enveloped Lana, not as a physical barrier, but as a zone of pure tranquility. It was her candle in the storm. Protected by that calm, Lana reached out with her senses, not her hands. She opened her mind to the ocean. The feedback was instantaneous and horrific. She gasped, her body arching back as the collective agony of a million dying creatures flooded her senses. It was a psychic scream of poison, suffocation, and despair. But Lily's light held, a soothing balm against the raw wound, allowing Lana to push past the pain and connect with the deeper, colder, more powerful consciousness of the sea itself. At that same moment, as if on cue, 2 Warden hovercrafts screamed over the cliffs, deploying a dozen soldiers onto the beaches just outside the cove. There they are, Ash yelled. Let's go, Pikachu. Volt tackle. Sarina. Trop kick. The battle for the beach began. Ash and Mallow fought with a desperate, coordinated fury, a dance of lightning and graceful, powerful kicks. They weren't using their new powers, they were relying on the tried and true bonds with their Pokémon. They were outnumbered, but they were defending their family. They were a wall. In the lagoon, Lana had found it. She had pushed through the screaming pain of the dying surface and touched the vast, deep, and ancient power of Tapu Fini, who was stirring in the abyssal depths, enraged. It wasn't a conversation. It was a merging of wills, a silent agreement. They have harmed our children. They will be removed. Lana's eyes snapped open. They were glowing with a faint, purple light. She raised her arms. Out in the ocean, the water around the Warden submarine began to churn. The crew inside registered a sudden, inexplicable pressure change. Sir, massive energy reading, right below us. An analyst shouted on the bridge. It's off the charts. It's the whole ocean. The submarine was lifted, groaning and creaking, on a rising swell of water. But it wasn't a wave. The water began to spin, faster and faster, forming a colossal waterspout. It was a contained, controlled hurricane with the Warden submarine trapped at its heart. On the beach, the fighting stopped. The Wardens and Ash and Mallow alike could only stare in disbelief at the impossible sight. The waterspout, a roaring funnel of sea and sky, lifted the multi-ton war machine out of the ocean as if it were a child's toy. Metal screamed in protest as the hull was twisted and warped. Lana, her arms still raised, let out a primal cry that was her own and yet also the voice of the deep. With a final, powerful thrust of her arms, she hurled the waterspout, and the submarine within it, towards the island. It flew through the air in a majestic, terrifying arc and crashed into the cliffs miles down the coast with an earth-shattering explosion of metal and rock. Then, the power receded. The waterspout collapsed. Lana's eyes returned to normal, and the immense strength that had held her up vanished. Her knees buckled. She fell forward, completely spent. Ash, seeing her fall, broke from his battle trance. He was there in an instant, splashing into the lagoon to catch her before she went under. He swept her up into his arms, her body limp with exhaustion. The remaining Wardens, their primary weapon destroyed in a way that defied all logic and physics, stared at the small group on the beach, then at the smoking wreckage down the coastline. They scrambled back to their remaining hovercraft and fled without firing another shot. Ash carried Lana to the sand, laying her down gently. Lily and Mallow rushed to her side. She was unconscious, but she was breathing steadily. The wave crest mark on her chest glowed with a soft, pulsing light. On the beach, the sick Pokémon began to stir, the poison in the water already starting to recede, cleansed by the sheer force of what Lana and Tapu Fini had done. Mallow and Lily looked from Lana's peaceful face to the distant, ruined cliffs where a warship lay broken. They finally understood. Lana had been right. This wasn't about power. It was about a trust so absolute it could command the sea. And Ash, by placing his faith in her, had allowed that miracle to happen. Their bond was the true weapon. Ash looked down at Lana, his heart pounding with a mixture of awe and a fierce, protective instinct he had never felt before. He had trusted her, and she had moved the ocean for them. Chapter 3 End. Chapter 4. The Empath's Burden. Lana's recovery took 2 full days. While she slept, her breathing deep and even, the cove seemed to hold its breath with her. The sickened Pokémon revived, the waters of the lagoon returned to their crystalline clarity, and the ugly brown slick on the horizon vanished, as if the ocean itself had scoured away the stain. It was a testament to the sheer scale of the power she had channeled. When she finally woke, she was weak but lucid, the steel in her eyes replaced by her usual placid calm. She sat up, looked at the peaceful cove, and gave a small, tired smile. "It's quiet again," she murmured. The victory, however, was a sobering one. They had destroyed a major piece of Warden hardware and escaped, but they had also revealed their hand. Kratos now knew where they were, or at least, where they had been. He knew they were fighting back, and he knew the raw potential of their power. The hidden cove was no longer a sanctuary, it was a liability. "We have to move," Ash said, as the 4 of them gathered around a small fire that evening, roasting salvaged Oron berries from the boat. "Kratos won't just give up. He'll send more ships, more soldiers. He'll scour this entire coastline. But where do we go?" Lily asked, voicing the question that hung heavy in the air. We're fugitives on our own home islands. It was Mallow who answered, a new, determined light in her eyes. The desperation that had plagued her since their escape had been burned away by the battle on the beach, replaced by a simmering, focused anger. We go to my home, she said. Akala. Specifically, the lush jungle. It's the heart of the island. It's dense, sacred, and I know it better than anyone. Not even Kratos's technology can see through that canopy. It's a place of life. A place we can heal. There was a logic to it that was undeniable. Mele Mele was too close to Ether Paradise. Ula Ula was Nanu's territory, too stark and exposed. Pony was too wild, too dangerous. Akala, with its deep, vibrant jungles, was the perfect place to disappear. They left under the cover of a moonless night, scuttling the boat in the deep waters of the channel to remove any trace of their presence. The journey to Akala was made in stages, a grueling trek through the untamed wilds that connected the islands, avoiding all roads and settlements. Mallow was their guide, navigating them through forgotten trails and dense undergrowth with an instinct that left Ash in awe. She was in her element here, the fear she'd shown in the sterile confines of Ether Paradise replaced by a quiet, formidable confidence. They arrived at the edge of the lush jungle on the third day, exhausted, hungry, and covered in grime. But as they stepped under the shade of the first great banyan tree, a sense of relief washed over them. The air here was different, thick, humid, and thrumming with a million tiny heartbeats. It was a symphony of life. But Mallow stopped dead at the entrance, her confident expression faltering. She reached out a hand, touching the bark of a tree. A frown creased her brow. Mallow, what's wrong? Ash asked. I don't know, she said, her voice laced with confusion. It feels quiet, too quiet. As they ventured deeper, the others began to feel it too. The jungle, which should have been a cacophony of sound, was muted. The vibrant colors of the flowers seemed faded, the leaves of the trees drooped with a strange lethargy, and the air, usually so full of life, felt heavy, stagnant. It was like walking through a beautiful painting that was slowly gathering dust. The jungle wasn't dead, but it was deeply, unnervingly sick. Mallow grew more agitated with every step. She would press her hands to the earth, run her fingers over wilting ferns, her breath growing shorter. The floral mark on her shoulder, usually a soft, ambient green, began to pulse with a feverish, sickly yellow light. It's in pain, she whispered, her hands trembling. The whole jungle. It's being suffocated. As an empath whose power was directly tied to the life of the land, Mallow was not just observing the sickness, she was experiencing it. A dull, throbbing headache began behind her eyes. A wave of nausea rolled through her stomach. It was the collective, low-grade agony of a million plants, a white noise of suffering that was steadily growing louder in her mind. Mallow, maybe we should stop, Lily suggested, her voice laced with concern. No, Mallow snapped, whirling on her. I have to find the source. I have to fix it. Her reaction was so sharp, so unlike her usual cheerful demeanor, that Lily flinched back. Ash stepped between them. Easy, Mallow. We're all on the same side. But Mallow barely seemed to hear him. She was being guided by the pain now, pushing through the jungle with a frantic energy. They followed, their unease growing as the signs of the sickness became more pronounced. Patches of earth were barren and gray, streams ran with a sluggish, discolored water, and the Pokemon they saw were listless and weak. They found the source in a deep, hidden valley. It wasn't a visible poison, like the kind Lana had faced. It was something far more insidious. In the center of the valley, concealed by a sophisticated cloaking field that shimmered at the edges like a heat haze, was a structure. A prefabricated, metallic base, humming with a low, discordant energy. Wires and thick cables snaked out from it like metallic roots, burrowing deep into the earth. It was another Warden facility. They're not poisoning it, Ash realized, his voice a low growl. They're draining it. They're sucking the life right out of the jungle. The revelation hit Mallow like a physical blow. She staggered, a cry of pain escaping her lips as she clutched her head. The low thrum of the facility was a spike of agony in her mind. It's him, she gasped, her eyes screwed shut. It's Tapu Bulu. They've attached themselves to his roots, to the heart of the island. They're siphoning his energy. Her power, agitated by her pain and fury, began to lash out. The ground around her feet erupted with thick, thorny vines, not green and vibrant, but a sickly, grayish color. They whipped through the air, smashing against trees with uncontrolled force. Mallow, get a grip. Ash yelled, dodging a flailing vine. I can't, she screamed, her voice filled with a pain that wasn't entirely her own. It hurts. Make it stop. She was no longer just feeling the jungle's pain, she was amplifying it, her power becoming a conduit for its suffering. She was a danger to them, and to herself. Ash knew he had to stop her, but how? He couldn't just attack her. This time, it was Lily who stepped forward. Her face was pale, but her expression was one of absolute resolve. She had seen this before. She had seen a friend consumed by a power they couldn't control, buckling under a pain that wasn't theirs. She remembered Ash, sitting with her on the training deck, not trying to fix her, but just sharing her fear. She knew what she had to do. Don't touch her, Ash, she said, her voice calm and steady. Let me. She walked slowly towards the raging Mallow, whose eyes were now glowing with that same sickly yellow light. The thorny vines lashed at the air around her like frantic, desperate limbs. Mallow, Lily said softly, her hands raised, not in a defensive posture, but an open, offering one. I'm here. I'm right here. You're not alone in this. She reached out, not with her power, but with her own empathy. She remembered the crushing weight of her mother's expectations, the suffocating fear of the ultra beasts, the psychic agony of Kratos's weapon. She found the core of Mallow's pain and spoke to it. I know it hurts, she continued, taking another step closer. The vines paused in their wild thrashing. But you are not the jungle. You are its guardian. You have to be its strength, not its suffering. As she spoke, she began to glow. A gentle, pearlescent light enveloped her. She wasn't creating a barrier. She was creating a sanctuary. She reached Mallow and, without hesitating, wrapped her arms around her friend, pulling her into an embrace. The moment Lily's light touched her, Mallow's pained cries softened. The light acted as a filter, a psychic shield that didn't block the pain, but soothed it, turning the screaming agony into a manageable, distant ache. The sickly yellow glow in Mallow's eyes faded, and the thorny vines withered, crumbling to dust. She collapsed against Lily, her body racked with shuddering sobs of relief. I'm sorry, Mallow wept into Lily's shoulder. I couldn't control it. Shish. It's okay, Lily whispered, holding her tight. You don't have to carry it by yourself. Ash and Lana watched, a silent understanding passing between them. On the beach, Lana had been the anchor. Here, in the dying jungle, Lily was. They were learning to be the pillars that held each other up. The bond between the two girls, forged in that embrace of shared pain and soothing light, solidified into something unbreakable. A true sisterhood. Once Mallow had recovered, her mind clear for the first time since entering the jungle, a cold, hard anger took root. They have to pay for this, she said, her voice devoid of its usual warmth. We're not just going to run them off. We are going to tear the thing down. A direct assault is what they'll expect, Lana cautioned. They won't expect this, Mallow replied, a new, dangerous glint in her eye. She looked at Lily. You said I needed to be the jungle's strength. You're right. But strength isn't just about healing. It's also about ripping out the disease by the root. She looked at the lab, then back at her friends. I have a plan. Her plan was both elegant and audacious. A direct assault would fail. Their powers were still vulnerable. But the wardens were focused on siphoning energy from the jungle. They wouldn't be prepared for a massive surge of energy flowing back at them. Ash fully embraced his role. Lana and I will create a diversion, he said, his eyes gleaming with determination. We'll draw the main guard to the southern perimeter. That'll give you two the opening you need to get inside. The assault began at dusk. Ash and Lana, moving like shadows, launched a series of lightning-fast strikes at the patrol drones and automated sentries on the far side of the base. Pikachu's iron tail, combined with Poplio's aqua jet, created chaos, a flurry of metal and water that sent the warden patrols scrambling. It was the spear tip, sharp and distracting. While the bulk of the forces were drawn away, Mallow and Lily slipped through the shimmering cloaking field on the northern side. Lily's light bent around them, a bubble of psychic camouflage that made them nearly invisible. They found a maintenance hatch, and with a focused burst of energy from Mallow that caused the locking mechanism to overgrow with vines and burst apart, they were in. The inside of the lab was a sterile, humming nightmare of cables and conduits, all leading to a massive, pulsating core in the center of the main chamber. This was the heart of the siphon, drawing the life force of Tapu Bulu into its greedy, technological maw. "Stay with me, Lily," Mallow whispered, her hand finding Lily's. "Always," Lily replied, her own light intensifying, wrapping around Mallow like a protective cloak. Shielded from the ambient, painful thrum of the machine by Lily's power, Mallow walked to the core. She placed both hands on its cold, vibrating surface. She didn't try to smash it. She didn't try to overload it. She did what Lana had taught her to do with the banyan tree. She listened. She felt the flow of energy, the greedy, one-way pull. And then, with Lily's soothing light protecting her mind, she pushed back. She didn't just sever the connection. She reversed it. She opened the floodgates of her own power, becoming a conduit for Tapu Bulu himself. A raw, untamed, furious wave of pure life energy, the pent-up power of an angry god, surged from the earth, up through the cables, and slammed into the lab's core. On the bridge of the facility, alarms blared. "Sir, energy readings are off the charts. We're not siphoning, we're being flooded." An analyst screamed. The core glowed a furious, vibrant green. The metal groaned, twisted, and then burst. The wave of life-giving energy exploded outwards. It wasn't a destructive force, but a creative one. Cables sprouted leaves. Metal plates grew bark. Computer consoles bloomed with giant, luminous flowers. The entire facility was consumed, overgrown, and torn apart from the inside out by a tidal wave of explosive, uncontrollable life. The jungle was taking back what was stolen, with interest. Outside, Ash and Lana watched in stunned silence as the shimmering cloaking field collapsed, revealing the lab being consumed by a newly vibrant, glowing forest. The Warden soldiers, seeing their base being eaten by nature itself, threw down their weapons and fled in terror. Mallow and Lily walked out of the wreckage, hand in hand, unscathed. The jungle around them was already healing, the colors more vibrant, the air humming with a renewed energy. Mallow looked at Ash, her face smudged with dirt but her eyes clear and bright. The sickly yellow had been replaced by a deep, healthy green. A smile finally returned to her face, one of genuine warmth and profound gratitude. "Thanks for the distraction," she said. Ash just grinned, a deep sense of pride swelling in his chest. He looked at Mallow, standing tall as the jungle's savior. He looked at Lily, her light no longer a sign of fear, but a beacon of strength and compassion. He looked at Lana, the quiet rock who had held them all together. They weren't just a team. They were a single, cohesive unit. And they were just getting started. Chapter 4 End. Chapter 5. The Shield of the Mind. The victory in lush jungle felt different. It was sharper, more satisfying, but it left no room for celebration. They had taken a piece from Kratos, a significant one, and they knew there would be no quiet recovery this time. There would be retaliation, swift and brutal. Their new refuge was on Ulaula Island, in a small, abandoned cabin on the desolate slopes of Mount Lanakila, provided by the disgraced Kahuna Nanu. He had contacted them through a secret, untraceable channel, his message typically grim and to the point. "He's not just fighting you anymore. He's trying to erase you. Stay low. Stay quiet." The cabin was stark and cold, a world away from the vibrant life of Akalar, the serene sanctuary of their hidden cove. The biting wind that howled down from the mountain peak was a constant reminder of their isolation. It was here, huddled around a crackling fire, that they first saw it. A news broadcast playing on a small, battery-powered television Nanu had left for them. The face of Annabelle, the news anchor, was grave. "The crisis in Alola escalates," she announced, her voice filled with professional solemnity. What was initially reported as a contained incident at Ether Paradise has now been revealed by Ethereum director Kratos to be a far more significant threat. Kratos's face filled the screen. He was no longer in his gray military uniform but in a sharp, reassuringly civilian suit. He stood at a podium, the Ether Foundation logo gleaming behind him. He looked like a leader, a savior. "My fellow citizens of Alola," he began, his voice a carefully crafted instrument of calm authority. "For weeks, my wardens and I have been working to contain a threat of unprecedented scale. An outsider, the Kanto trainer Ash Ketchum, has somehow acquired a dangerous, unstable power. Worse, he has used his influence to manipulate 3 of our own beloved daughters, Malo Vodello, Lana Swearin, and most tragically, Lily Ether, a young woman who has already endured so much trauma. The camera cut to Lily's official Ether portrait, a picture of her from years ago, looking small, fragile, and lost. We believe Ketchum is leveraging Miss Ether's known psychological fragility to control her and the others, Kratos continued, his voice dripping with false sympathy. He has formed a cult-like group, and their combined instability has already resulted in catastrophic destruction. The screen flashed with images. An aerial shot of the Warden submarine, a twisted wreck on the Pony coastline. Then, footage of the Akala facility, completely consumed by an unnatural, glowing jungle. It was expertly edited, stripped of all context, presented as a terrifying display of wanton destruction. My sources indicate these individuals are now hiding on Ula Island, Kratos concluded, his expression hardening. For your own safety, I urge you to report any sightings. Do not approach them. They are dangerous. We are not fighting a group of children. We are fighting a disease that threatens the very soul of Alola. We will bring our daughters home, and we will restore order. The broadcast ended, but the poison of Kratos' words lingered in the cold mountain air. Ash slammed his fist against the cabin wall, a splintering crack echoing in the stunned silence. He's lying. He's twisting everything. Mallow was on her feet, her face flushed with rage. Cult. Brainwashed. How dare he? Lana said nothing, but the look in her eyes was colder than the mountain wind, a deep, simmering fury. But Lily just sat there, staring at the blank screen, her face as white as the snow on the peak outside. Kratos' words had bypassed all her newfound strength, every bit of progress she had made, and struck her in the one place she was still deeply, incurably vulnerable, her past. Known psychological fragility. He had taken her greatest trauma, the story of her survival and recovery, and turned it into a weapon against her. He had redefined her not as a survivor, but as a broken thing, too weak to have a will of her own. Lily. Ash asked gently, his own anger dissolving into immediate concern for her. She didn't respond. She just pulled her knees to her chest, wrapping her arms around them, making herself small. It was a posture he hadn't seen since her earliest days in Alola, the defensive shell of a girl who expected the world to hurt her. Over the next few days, Kratos' campaign intensified. It was a masterwork of psychological warfare. He didn't just control the narrative, he became it. News reports featured concerned citizens of Hau'oli and Heihei City, talking about how they now feared the new champion. He had a captured Faba, looking haggard and coerced, give a tearful, expert testimony about Lily's delicate mental state after her mother's experiments, how she was highly susceptible to charismatic and dominant personalities. The public, already on edge from the Ultra Beast invasions and Lucamine's reign, was fertile ground for Kratos' seeds of fear. Protests began to spring up. At first, they were small vigils for the captured girls. Soon, they morphed into angry mobs demanding that the kahunas, who had gone silent, take action against the outsider and his witches. The world they had fought to protect was turning on them, cheering for the villain and calling for the heads of the heroes. The effect on the group was corrosive. They were trapped in the cabin, able to do nothing but watch their names be dragged through the mud. The tension was a thick, suffocating blanket. Fights broke out over small things, born of frustration and helplessness. But the worst part was watching Lily fade. She barely spoke, barely ate. She would spend hours staring at the butterfly mark on her wrist, her expression haunted. Kratos was winning without firing a single shot. He was breaking their shield from the inside out. One evening, after a particularly vicious broadcast that featured old family photos of Lily with her mother, Ash found her outside the cabin, standing at the edge of a cliff, looking down at the distant lights of Po Town. The wind whipped her blonde hair around her face. "You shouldn't be out here alone," he said softly, coming to stand beside her. She didn't look at him. "He's right, you know," she said, her voice hollow. "About me?" Lily. "No. Yes, he is," she insisted, a terrible, broken calmness in her tone. "I am fragile. I am weak. Look at me. You and Mallow and Lana, you're all fighting. But I'm just hiding. Falling apart. Just like he said I would. Maybe I am just a victim. Maybe that's all I'll ever be. Ash listened, his heart aching for her. He knew that arguing, telling her she was wrong, would be useless. She had to believe it herself. He thought back to all the moments he had seen her true strength. Facing down her mother. Crossing the bridge to save Nebby. Standing beside him on the training deck. When we first met, he began, his voice quiet, you were too scared to even touch a Pokemon. I remember that. But I also remember the girl who walked into an ultra wormhole to save her mother, with no powers, no guarantee she'd ever come back. I remember the girl who stood up to a totem Pokemon with nothing but her wits. And I remember the girl who shielded her friend from a pain so great it was breaking her mind. He took a step closer. Kratos is using your past against you, Lily. He's trying to make you forget who you are now. But I haven't forgotten. Mallow and Lana haven't forgotten. We know who you are. You're the strongest person I've ever met. Tears began to stream down Lily's face, hot against her cold cheeks. But I'm so scared, Ash. I know, he said. He reached out, not to hug her, but just to rest his hand gently on her shoulder, a simple, grounding touch. But you're not scared alone. Not anymore. His words, his unwavering faith in a version of herself she couldn't see at the moment, were an anchor in her storm. She didn't reply, but she leaned into his touch, just for a second, drawing strength from it. It wasn't a cure, but it was a start. The breaking point came 2 days later. Kratos, believing he had won the hearts and minds of Alola, announced his final move. He would be traveling to Ula Island personally to oversee the peaceful detention of the fugitives and the rescue of Lily Ether. He invited the media to broadcast the entire event live. It was a bold, arrogant move, designed to cement his status as Alola's protector. This is it, Mallow said, her fists clenched. He's coming for us. It's a trap, Lana stated, her eyes narrowed. He wants to force us into a public fight. If we use our powers, we prove him right. We look like monsters. And if we don't fight, Ash finished, he captures us. They were checkmated. Every option led to a loss. No. The voice was quiet, but it cut through their despair with the clarity of a ringing bell. They all turned to look at Lily. She was standing now, her back straight. The hollow, haunted look was gone from her eyes, replaced by a calm, cold fire. Ash's words on the cliff had been a seed. The fierce, protective looks Mallow and Lana had been giving her for days had been the water. Kratos' final, arrogant move was the sun. Something inside her had finally, irrevocably bloomed. There is another option, she said. We don't run. We don't hide. And we don't fight him on his terms. She looked at them, her gaze steady and filled with a terrifying resolve. We confront him. In front of everyone. Lily, that's suicide, Mallow protested. His soldiers. He's not bringing a full army, Lily reasoned, her mind working with a sharp, analytical clarity that surprised them all. That would look like an invasion. He's bringing a peacekeeping force and a lot of cameras. He's built a stage, and he expects us to be the villains in his play. But he's made a mistake. He's given me a stage, too. She looked directly at Ash. You said you remembered who I am. Now it's time I reminded everyone else. The confrontation took place in the dreary, neglected streets of Po Town. It was a deliberate choice by Lily. A town of outcasts, a place where people were forgotten. A fitting backdrop. When Kratos arrived with his honor guard of wardens and a swarm of news drones, he found them waiting for him in the desolate town square. Ash, Mallow, and Lana stood together, a silent, defiant line. And in front of them, alone, stood Lily. Lily. Thank Arceus, you're safe, Kratos boomed, his voice full of practiced concern for the cameras. He started to walk towards her, arms outstretched. It's over now. We're here to take you home. I am home, Lily replied, her voice steady and clear, amplified by the dead quiet of the square. She held up a hand. Stop. Do not come any closer. Kratos stopped, his benevolent mask flickering with irritation. My dear girl, you're confused. He's manipulated you. The only person manipulating anyone here is you, director, Lily cut him off. Her voice was not angry. It was factual, precise, and utterly unshakable. You have used my family's trauma to stoke fear. You have twisted acts of defense into acts of aggression. You have lied to the people of Alola. Kratos' smile tightened. Her mind is clearly compromised. You see, he said, gesturing to the news drones. We need to get her help. He subtly touched a device on his wrist. A low, humming sound filled the air. A subsonic frequency. The small crowd of Po Town residents and reporters who had gathered at the edge of the square began to shift uncomfortably. Fear, amplified and unnatural, began to creep into their hearts. Their unease turned to panic. This was his gambit. Create a riot, then step into save everyone. But Lily was ready. She saw the fear in the people's eyes, saw the trap closing. She closed her own eyes. Think of them. Think of this place. A candle, not a wildfire. But she was past that now. This wasn't about a candle. It was about the dawn. She let her power out. All of it. It did not erupt. It bloomed. A massive, silent dome of pure, pearlescent light expanded from her, washing over the entire square, over all of Po Town, stretching out for miles. It was not a physical barrier. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated tranquility. The subsonic frequency from Kratos' device was instantly neutralized, shattered like glass. The artificial panic in the crowd vanished, replaced by a profound sense of peace and clarity. The news drones sputtered and fell from the sky, their systems overloaded by the psychic energy. The wardens staggered back, their high-tech armor useless against an emotional concept. Lily stood in the center of it all, glowing like a morning star. She was the absolute eye of the serene storm. She opened her eyes, and they were filled with a light that seemed ancient and powerful. My name is Lily Ether, she declared, her voice now resonating with the power she wielded, reaching every corner of the island. I am not a victim. I am not your pawn. My friends have not captured me. They have freed me. She gestured to Mallow and Lana. We are not witches. We are the daughters of this land. She looked at Ash. And he is not a tyrant. He is our champion. She finally turned her full, luminous gaze upon the stunned Kratos. We are the guardians of Alola. And you are the threat. Her words, backed by the undeniable truth of her power, were irrefutable. The people in the crowd stared at her, not with fear, but with awe. They had seen the truth. Not a fragile, broken girl, but a radiant, powerful protector. A shield. Kratos stood frozen, his plan, his narrative, his entire campaign utterly dismantled in a single, silent, beautiful moment. He had lost. Chapter 5 End. Chapter 6. The Shadow in the Rift. Lily's act of defiant tranquility had not been a bomb. It had been a sunrise. It didn't shatter Kratos' power structure with a violent explosion, but rather burned away the shadows of his lies with an undeniable light. In the aftermath of the confrontation at Po Town, his carefully constructed narrative crumbled to dust. News channels, no longer under his thumb, replayed the footage endlessly. The radiant, powerful young woman standing as a shield, and the would-be dictator, exposed and humiliated. Kratos and his remaining wardens had vanished in the ensuing chaos, a retreat so swift and total it was as if they had dissolved into the dreary Ula Ula mist. For the first time in weeks, Ash and his friends could breathe. The tide of public opinion, so easily swayed by fear, now swung back with the powerful momentum of awe and relief. They weren't fugitives anymore. They were saviors. But the victory felt hollow, incomplete. They remained in the cold mountain cabin, a temporary headquarters that now felt more like a watchtower. He's still out there, Ash said, pacing the worn wooden floor. The storm of power inside him, which had been a raging tempest during their flight, was now a low, anxious hum. Kratos isn't the type to just give up. He didn't run to hide. He ran to rearm. But what can he do? Mallow argued, trying to inject a note of optimism into the tense air. His reputation is destroyed. The Ether Foundation has officially disavowed him. Gladion has retaken full control. He has no support, no resources. A zealot doesn't need support, Lana said quietly from her corner, her eyes distant. He only needs a cause. And his cause is now revenge. Lana's words were prophetic. As the days passed, a new kind of fear began to creep across Alola. Not the manufactured panic of Kratos' propaganda, but a genuine, chilling uncertainty. Warden patrols had vanished, but so had several high-ranking ether scientists, all specialists in dimensional research. Key components for a prototype energy reactor had disappeared from a secure ether facility. Small things, easily dismissed as administrative errors in the chaos, but when Nanu pieced the reports together for them, a terrifying picture began to emerge. He's not building an army, Nanu's grim voice crackled over their secure communicator. He's building a bomb. Or something worse. All the material he's stolen, it points to one location. The place where the barrier between worlds is thinnest. He's going to Pony Island. To the altar. A collective cold shock went through the group. The altar of the sun. A place of immense, sacred power, where they had once saved the world by summoning the legendary Pokemon. Why? Lily whispered, her hand instinctively going to the empty Pokeball where she had once kept Nebby. Because he's insane, Ash answered, his fists clenching. He felt a sharp, painful pulse from the sun crest mark on his hand, a sympathetic tremor from the heart of Alola itself. He can't beat us. He can't beat the Tapu. So he's going to summon something that can. An Ultra Beast. He tried that with my mother, Lily said, her voice trembling slightly. It leads to madness. To ruin. He's already there, Ash said. We have to go. Now. The race to Pony Island was a frantic, desperate affair. Gladian provided them with an unmarked, high-speed ether transport, a sleek black craft that skimmed inches above the waves. The journey was a tense silence, the low thrum of the ship's engines a counterpoint to the pounding of their own hearts. As they approached the island, the sky itself seemed wrong. The air was thin and charged with a strange, dissonant energy, and the sun was hazed over, its light seeming weak and distant. They landed at the base of the Great Canyon and raced up the long, winding path to the altar. The usual tranquility of the place was gone, replaced by an oppressive, heavy silence. When they reached the top, the sight that greeted them stopped them cold. The vast, circular platform of the altar of the sun had been desecrated. In the center, Kratos and a small, hardcore contingent of his most loyal wardens stood around a monstrous machine. It was a grotesque fusion of gleaming ether technology and dark, ancient-looking stone artifacts that pulsed with a sickening purple light. Wires and conduits snaked across the sacred glyphs on the floor, feeding power into a central focusing lens aimed at the sky. Kratos turned to face them as they approached. The calm, calculating director was gone forever. In his place was a wild-eyed fanatic, his uniform torn, his face pale with a feverish obsession. The champion and his child gods, he sneered, his voice cracking with manic energy. You're too late. You see, your little light show in Po Town taught me a valuable lesson. I was trying to contain a disease. But you don't contain a cancer. You cut it out. You burn it from the body so that the body can heal. You're the disease, Kratos. Mallow yelled, her hands glowing with a furious green energy. Am I? He laughed, a high, unhinged sound. I am the surgeon. The people of Alola are weak, sentimental. They worship their own cages. The Tapu, these forces of nature you serve, they are chaos. They stunt our growth, our potential. I will free humanity from the tyranny of myth. I will bring them true, quantifiable order. He turned back to his machine. I sought to control a legendary power. A foolish half measure. Now, I will summon one that can erase it. A power of absolute consumption. A being that will devour your gods, and then, Alola can finally be rebuilt, structured, perfect. He slammed his fist down on an activation panel. Let the new world begin. The machine roared to life. A beam of pure, chaotic energy, a shrieking vortex of purple and black, shot up from the lens and struck the apex of the altar. The air tore open. Reality itself seemed to scream in protest. It wasn't the familiar, shimmering blue of an ultra wormhole. It was a jagged, violent rip in the fabric of space, a wound that bled blackness and absorbed the light around it, its edges crawling like living static. The team braced themselves, their Pokemon leaping to their side, their powers flaring to life. They expected a Guzzlord, a Nihilego, some monstrous beast to erupt from the void. But what emerged was a woman. She stepped through the rift not with a roar, but with a serene, regal grace, as if stepping from a carriage. She was tall and impossibly ancient, her long, silver hair braided with what looked like solidified shadows. Her robes were of a style that hadn't been seen in Alola for 1,000 years, and her skin was a pale, marble-like white. Her eyes, however, were the most terrifying part. They were a solid, luminous purple, holding no warmth, no emotion, only an abyss of time and a chilling, condescending intelligence. She surveyed the scene, the altar, the machine, Kratos's triumphant face, the defiant heroes, with the mild, detached interest of a queen observing the squabbles of insects. Kratos stared at her, his manic grin faltering into confusion. What? Who are you? I summoned the great devourer. The woman's lips curved into a smile that was somehow more terrifying than any snarl. You did, she said, her voice a soft, melodic whisper that carried across the entire altar, seeming to echo directly inside their minds. But you are a foolish, short-sighted child. You sought a weapon. I am the will that guides it. She took another step forward, her gaze falling upon Kratos. You seek order. You built a key, thinking it was a crown. I have been watching you, little man. Whispering to your scientists in their dreams. Guiding your hands as you stole the artifacts of my people. Your obsession was the perfect tool to weaken the seals. Your technology, the perfect catalyst to finally break my prison. I thank you for your service. Kratos's face went slack with dawning, uncomprehending horror. No, I was in control. You were never in control of anything, the woman said, her smile vanishing. She raised a single, elegant hand. Tendrils of pure, solid shadow erupted from the ground around Kratos and his wardens. They screamed, a shrill, terrible sound that was cut short as the shadows enveloped them. Their bodies convulsed, and their life force, their very essence, was visibly drawn out of them in streams of shimmering light that flowed into the woman. In seconds, the wardens were nothing more than dried, withered husks in their pristine armor, crumbling to dust that the mountain wind swept away. Kratos was the last to go. His eyes were wide with the sheer terror of a man who had seen the face of the cosmic horror he had so arrogantly sought to command. The woman, Malama, as she now named herself in their minds, leaned in close to his fading form. Your age of order is over, she whispered. My age of true, divine right is about to begin. His body disintegrated. The team could only watch, frozen in absolute shock. The enemy they had fought for weeks, the man who had torn their lives apart, had just been snuffed out like a candle, an insignificant footnote in the arrival of a far greater, far older evil. Malama drank in the stolen life force, a faint, satisfied sigh escaping her lips. Her pale skin seemed to glow with a renewed vitality. She turned her ancient, purple eyes upon Ash and his friends. So, she said, her voice resonating with power. This is what the false gods chose to replace me. A child from a foreign land, a broken little doll, a weed picker, and a fish whisperer. How far the guardians of Alola have fallen. She took a step towards them, and the very ground beneath her feet seemed to wither and die, the stone turning a dark, sickly gray. I am Malama, the first scorned, the rightful champion of this land. The Tapu, in their cowardice, rejected my strength and imprisoned me in shadow. But I have returned. I will reclaim my throne, and I will show this world what true power looks like. To punctuate her declaration, she reached a hand back into the still open black rift behind her. My predecessor sought to command a beast. A foolish endeavor. One does not command a force of nature. One simply unleashes it. She pulled. And from the depths of the shadowy void, a creature of nightmare began to emerge. It was a guzzlord, but a horrific perversion of one. Its body was not flesh, but coalesced, writhing shadow. Its eyes burned with a cold, hungry light, and as it fully entered their reality, it let out a roar that was not sound, but a wave of pure despair that washed over them. An Umbra Guzzlord. Let us begin the cleansing, Malama said calmly. The Umbra Guzzlord opened its vast, gaping maw and inhaled. It didn't suck in air or rock. It sucked in the light. The hazy sunlight dimmed dramatically, as if a storm cloud had instantly covered the sun. The life energy from the sparse vegetation on the mountain path withered, turning to gray ash. The world grew colder, darker, quieter. At that moment, the sky finally broke. 4 streaks of color, yellow, pink, green, and blue, shot down from the heavens. The 4 Tapu appeared, radiating an aura of pure, divine rage at the sacrilege being committed in their most holy of places. Tapu Koko let out a furious shriek and charged, cloaked in a lightning storm that could have leveled a city. It slammed into the Umbra Guzzlord. The beast barely flinched. One of its shadowy claws swatted the island guardian away as if it were an annoying fly. Tapu Koko was sent tumbling through the air, crashing into the side of the canyon with a sickening crunch. Malama simply watched, an amused, condescending smile on her face, as the other three guardians launched their own futile assaults. The god-level threat Kratos had dreamed of was here. And it was already winning. Ash, Lily, Mallow, and Lana stood on the desecrated altar, facing an ancient, scorned priestess and her shadow beast that had just effortlessly defeated a god, and for the first time, they felt the chilling, sickening touch of true hopelessness. Chapter 6 End. Chapter 7. The Fourfold Sun. The world had become a canvas of gray and purple. The Umbra Guzzlord's presence was a blight upon reality, its shadow flesh devouring the very concept of color and warmth. The air was frigid, carrying on it a psychic miasma of hopelessness that clung to the skin like grave dirt. Tapu Koko lay groaning in the crater it had made in the canyon wall, its divine light flickering like a dying ember. The other Tapu fared no better. Their sacred powers, Lili's restorative scales, Bulu's life-giving force, Feeney's purifying mist, were all being absorbed and nullified by the beast's all-consuming aura. Malama watched the slow, agonizing defeat of her jailers with a placid, almost bored expression. This wasn't a battle, it was an execution. You see, she said, her voice a silken thread in the suffocating silence, directed at the four humans huddled on the altar. Your gods are nothing. They are relics, sentimental fools who chose compassion over dominion. A fatal error. Ash watched, his heart a cold, tight knot in his chest. Hopelessness. It was a feeling he despised, a poison he had always refused to swallow. But seeing the island guardians, beings of immense power, being dismantled so effortlessly, it was a hard thing to fight. But then he looked at his friends. Lily, her face pale with terror, but her hands were raised, projecting a thin, trembling shield of light around them, a tiny candle against a hurricane. Mallow stood at her side, her knuckles white, vines of pure life energy wrapped around her arms like bracers, ready to fight a battle she knew she couldn't win. Lana stood slightly in front of them both, her stance low, her eyes narrowed, drawing moisture from the thin, cold air to form shimmering blades of hardened water in her hands. They were terrified. They were outmatched. And they were not backing down. That sight, that simple, impossible courage, was the flint that struck a spark in the darkness of Ash's despair. His fear didn't vanish, but it was consumed by a sudden, white-hot surge of rage. Pikachu, he said, his voice low and dangerous. Let's show her what a relic can do. 10 million volt Thunderbolt. It was their ultimate move, the Z move born of their perfect, unbreakable bond. Ash went through the familiar motions, a dance of power that felt more desperate and more meaningful than ever before. He poured every ounce of his will, his love for his friends, his fury at Malama, into the Z ring. Pikachu soared into the air, a tiny, defiant sun against the encroaching darkness, and unleashed a rainbow-hued torrent of absolute electrical power. The bolt struck the Umbra Guzzlord dead center. For a glorious, blinding second, it seemed to work. The beast recoiled, its shadowy form flickering violently as the Z move tore into it. But then, with a guttural roar that shook the mountain, it absorbed the attack. The rainbow colors of the thunderbolt were sucked into its black hide, vanishing without a trace. The beast seemed to swell, its shadowy form growing darker, more stable. It had literally eaten their ultimate attack. A bright flash of defiance, Malama commented, her tone laced with condescending pity. How quaint. You channel the power of a single tapu, filtered through your own weak mortal spirit. My creation consumes power itself. It is a battle you have already lost. She turned her gaze on their unified stance. Your bond, this pathetic, diluted thing you share. 4 separate streams, pretending to be a river. It is a mockery of true Alolan power, which demands a single, unified will. A single vessel. Her words were meant to mock them, to break their spirit. But for Ash, hearing them, a thought ignited in his mind. A wild, desperate, and absolutely terrifying idea. A single vessel. He looked at the failing Tapu, at his exhausted friends, at the monster that was now turning its hungry gaze upon them. They had no other choice. He let his own power fade, the storm inside him going quiet. He turned to the girls, his expression so intense, so serious, that it stopped their own frantic preparations cold. She's right, he said. Mallow stared at him, aghast. Ash, what are you talking about? Not about us being weak. he clarified, his voice urgent, racing against time. About how we're fighting. Separately. It's not enough. We have to become one. What does that even mean? Lily asked, her voice trembling. Ash took a deep, shuddering breath, the sheer insanity of what he was about to suggest settling on him like a shroud. I need you to give it all to me, he said, his eyes meeting each of theirs in turn. Your power. The light from Lele, the life from Bulu, the spirit from Feeny. All of it. I need you to channel it into me. Into my mark. The silence that followed was broken only by the horrifying sound of the Umbra Guzzlord beginning to shamble towards them. Ash, that's impossible, Lily whispered. The power, the feedback from my own was almost too much. All three at once. It could tear you apart. I don't care, Ash said, his voice raw with conviction. It's the only chance we have. You have to trust me. All of you. 100%. No fear. No hesitation. You have to pour everything you are into me. He held out his hands, palms up, in the center of their small circle. An offering. An invitation. A final, desperate plea. Lily looked at his outstretched hands, then at his face, at the absolute, unwavering faith in his eyes. He wasn't asking them to be his weapons. He was asking to be their shield. She thought of him admitting his fear, of him believing in her on the cliffside. Her hesitation vanished. She placed her hand in his. A soft, pearlescent light flowed from her into him. Mallow was next. She saw the boy who had eaten her family's food with such gusto, who had fought for her home, who had trusted her to rip the heart out of the warden's machine. He wasn't just a champion. He was her friend. She slammed her hand on top of Lily's, and a vibrant, green energy surged into the growing confluence of power. Lana looked at Ash, and she saw the boy who had placed his complete and total trust in her, allowing her to move the very ocean. There was no choice to be made. Her decision had been made on that beach. She silently placed her hand on top of Mallow's, and a deep, swirling current of purple-blue energy joined the flood. The moment their powers combined inside him, Ash screamed. It was a sound of pure, unimaginable agony. It felt like three separate gods were at war inside his soul. His vision went white. His bones felt like they were dissolving, his very atoms being ripped apart and rewritten. Hold on, Ash. He heard their voices, not with his ears, but in his mind, a unified chorus of support. We're with you. Don't let go. He focused on their voices, on their unwavering trust. He stopped fighting the torrent of power and instead opened himself to it, becoming not a dam, but a conduit. The agony did not cease, but it found a purpose. The four separate streams of divine energy, Coco's storm, Lily's light, Bulu's life, and Feeny's spirit, slammed together in the core of his being infused. On the altar, a column of pure, incandescent white light erupted from Ash, shooting into the gray, blighted sky like a new sun being born. It was a light so powerful, so pure, that it physically pushed back the encroaching darkness. The Umbra Guzzlord actually recoiled, shielding its eyes with a shadowy claw, letting out a hiss of what sounded like pain. Malama's condescending smile finally fell, replaced by a look of genuine, stunned disbelief. No, it's not possible. The light subsided, revealing Ash. But it wasn't the boy they knew. He was still him, but he was more. His body radiated a soft, golden light. His eyes, once a familiar, warm brown, now glowed with the white-hot intensity of a star. The mark on his hand was no longer a faint, silvery symbol, it was a blazing brand of pure solar fire. Even Pikachu, on his shoulder, was transformed, its body crackling with golden, sun-flare electricity, its red cheeks burning like miniature suns. He had become the sun's champion. A single, unified vessel. He looked at the Umbra Guzzlord, and he didn't feel fear. He felt a deep, profound pity. He raised his hand. He didn't fire a beam or a bolt of energy. Light itself seemed to bend to his will. A wave of pure, purifying sunlight washed over the beast. It wasn't an attack. It was a cleansing. The Umbra Guzzlord shrieked, a sound of pure terror, as the golden light touched its shadowy hide. It didn't burn it. It unraveled it. The dark magic Malama had used to twist it into a being of consumption was being systematically dismantled, purified, returned to its natural state. The writhing shadows gave way to the familiar, if still intimidating, form of a regular Guzzlord, confused and disoriented. With a final, gentle push of light, Ash sent the Ultra Beast tumbling back through the still open rift, which then sealed behind it with a soft whisper of sound. Silence descended upon the altar. The oppressive gray was gone. The sun, a real and warm sun, was shining once more. Malama stared at the empty space where her ultimate weapon had been, then back at the transfigured boy, her face a mask of incandescent rage. You cheating, unworthy little mongrel. She shrieked, her regal composure shattering completely. You have tainted that sacred power with your half-breed bonds. I will tear it out of you myself. She lunged, faster than a striking rapidash, her hands tipped with claws of solidified shadow, aimed directly at Ash's heart. But he didn't move. He didn't have to. Lily, Mallow, and Lana, though drained from channeling their power, moved as one. Their connection to Ash was still open, a four-way circuit of shared will. They raised their hands in unison. Lily's light formed a perfect, unbreakable shield. Mallow's vines, now glowing with golden life, grew over the shield, reinforcing it. And Lana's water, infused with the purity of Ash's new form, coated the entire structure in a swirling, frictionless vortex. Shield, body, spirit. Malama's shadow claws struck the four-fold barrier. The impact was immense, a sound like a mountain cracking in two. But the barrier held. Not only did it hold, it repelled. The combined, harmonious power of the three guardians, amplified by their connection to Ash, blasted outwards, striking Malama and sending her flying backwards. She landed in a crumpled heap, a deep, smoking wound on her shoulder where their unified power had burned through her shadowy defenses. She looked at the four of them, standing together, a single, glowing unit. She looked at the wound, at the undeniable proof of their power. Her rage was eclipsed by a sudden, chilling fear. With a final, venomous snarl, she dissolved into a puddle of shadow, which then shot away from the altar and vanished into a crack in the rock. She had fled. The battle was over. The golden light around Ash began to fade, the immense power receding. The last thing he saw before his vision went black was the faces of his three friends, his guardians, his family, rushing towards him as he fell. Chapter 7 End. Chapter 8. The Scars of Dawn. The world returned to Ash not as a sudden crash, but as a slow, muffled hum. There were no thoughts, no images, just a formless, gray limbo and the distant, rhythmic beat of a heart that he wasn't sure was his own. He was adrift in a quiet sea, the echoes of divine fire and impossible power fading like a dream upon waking. The agony of his transformation, the terror of the Umbra Guzzlord, the incandescent rage of Malama, it was all distant thunder, a storm that had passed long ago. His first true sensation was warmth. It was a gentle, steady presence against his right hand. He clung to it, a drowning man finding a piece of driftwood. Slowly, painstakingly, he followed that warmth out of the gray nothingness, back towards the world of the living. He became aware of a new sound, soft, even breathing. And a scent, faint but familiar, of sun-drenched flowers and sweet berries. Mallow. The warmth on his hand was her hand, her calloused fingers gently intertwined with his. Another sensation emerged. A cool, soft pressure on his forehead, like a damp cloth laid there with immense care. It smelled of sea salt and clean rain. Lana. And then, a voice. A whisper so soft it was barely a breath, reading from a book. It was a story he vaguely recognized, a classic Alolan folk tale about the Amakua. The voice was gentle, clear, and filled with a quiet strength that felt like a shield. Lily. He was not alone. He had never been alone. That single, certain thought was the anchor that finally pulled him back to shore. He opened his eyes. The light was soft, filtered. He was in a clean, white room, the sterile scent of a medical facility a sharp contrast to the familiar presences around him. He recognized it as the advanced medical bay in Ether Paradise. He was lying in a bed, hooked up to monitors that beeped in a soft, steady rhythm. And they were there. All three of them. Just as he had sensed. They had pulled chairs up to his bedside, forming a tight, protective circle around him. Mallow was asleep, her head resting on the edge of his mattress, her hand still holding his. Lana was in her own chair, also asleep, her head tilted back at an angle that looked uncomfortable, a bowl of fresh water and a cloth on the table beside her. And Lily was in the third chair, a thick book resting in her lap, her eyes focused on the page. She hadn't noticed he was awake. They looked exhausted. There were dark circles under their eyes, a deep, weary tension in the set of their shoulders. But even in sleep, they were like sentinels, an unbreakable watch. Seeing them like that, so worn down and yet so fiercely present, sent a pang through Ash's heart more powerful than any physical pain. He tried to speak, but his throat was dry, and only a rough croak came out. It was enough. Lily's head snapped up, her eyes widening. The book fell from her lap, forgotten. Ash, she whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of hope and disbelief. Her voice woke the others. Mallow shot upright, her green eyes blinking, instantly alert. Lana stirred, her usual calm replaced by a sharp, sudden focus. In a heartbeat, they were all leaning in, their faces a blur of overwhelming relief. You're awake, Mallow breathed, her grip on his hand tightening. Oh, thank the Tapu, you're awake. Water, he managed to rasp. Lana was already there, dipping the cloth in the bowl and gently touching it to his lips. The cool water was the most wonderful thing he had ever tasted. How long? He asked, his voice a little stronger now. 5 days, Gladian's voice answered from the doorway. He walked in, followed by a relieved-looking Professor Kukui. You've been in a deep coma. The doctors couldn't explain it. Your vitals were stable, but you were just gone. Your body was trying to heal, Kukui added, his expression a mixture of scientific awe and fatherly concern. Ash, the amount of energy you channeled, it's a miracle it didn't burn you out completely. Your mortal body wasn't built to contain the power of 4 deities. Ash looked down at his hand. The blazing brand was gone, returned to the faint, silvery sun crest it had been before. He felt empty. The storm inside him was gone, the connection to the island's life force muted. He was just himself again. But the memory of that power, of that unity, remained. Malama, he asked, the name tasting like ash in his mouth. Vanished, Gladian said, his tone grim. The Tapu have healed, and they are on high alert. They've reinforced the ancient seals across Alola. But there's no sign of her. She's wounded, but she's out there. Somewhere. The news was sobering, but Ash couldn't focus on it. All he could see were the faces of his friends, the profound, bone-deep weariness that hadn't yet been erased by the joy of his waking. You guys, you didn't leave. Lily shook her head, a small, watery smile on her lips. Of course not. We wouldn't. We made a rota, Mallow explained, her own smile returning, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. For sleeping. But none of us really used it. It was during the quiet hours of those 5 long days that the truth had finally been spoken aloud. The vigil had been a crucible, melting away their individual fears and reforging them. On the 3rd night, when the fear that Ash might never wake up was a cold, physical presence in the room, Mallow had finally broken down. She had been staring at Ash's still face, tracing the faint mark on his hand. I'm not just scared of losing him, she had whispered into the quiet, her voice thick with unshed tears. That's the terrifying thing. If we lost him, I don't know what would happen to us. To the 3 of us. Lana, who had been gazing out the window at the star-dusted ocean, turned to her. Our bond was forged with his, she had said, her voice soft but certain. He is the heart, but we are the veins. We cannot exist without him, or each other. It was Lily who had found the words for the truth they were all circling. She had taken Mallow's hand in one of hers, and Lana's in the other, linking them together. When I was channeling my power into him, she'd said, her eyes looking at their joined hands, I could feel you. Both of you. It wasn't just me giving him my strength. It felt like, we were all holding each other up. My feelings for him, they don't feel separate from my feelings for you too. It's all the same love. The same bond. They were not rivals for a hero's affection. They had never been. They were a constellation, each star connected to all the others, their light and gravity intertwined. They were a family, born not of blood, but of divine fire and a shared, world-saving choice. To love Ash was to love Mallow and to love Lana. It was a single, indivisible truth. Now, looking at Ash, at his familiar, warm eyes finally open and looking back at them, that truth settled into a peaceful, unshakable certainty. Professor Kukui and Gladian, seeing that the immediate crisis was over, tactfully excused themselves, promising to bring back some of Mallow's father's restorative soup. They left the four of them alone in the quiet of the room, the soft beeping of the monitors the only sound. Ash pushed himself up slightly, his muscles aching in protest. He looked at them, really looked at them, and his heart swelled with a feeling so vast it left no room for words. Gratitude, love, respect, awe, it was all there, a swirling galaxy of emotions. Lily, sensing his struggle for words, spoke for them all. Her voice was quiet, stripped of all artifice, leaving only the raw, honest core of her heart. "We were so scared, Ash," she whispered, and a single, perfect tear traced a path down her cheek. "We thought we'd lost you." She looked at Mallow, then at Lana, drawing strength from their presence, before her gaze returned to him. "We love you." The "we" was not an accident. It was not a slip of the tongue. It was a declaration. It held the warmth of Mallow's fierce loyalty, the depth of Lana's unshakable calm, and the brilliance of Lily's compassionate light. It was the single, unified voice of their shared soul. Ash looked at Lily, the shield of their mind, whose strength had saved them all. He looked at Mallow, the body of their group, whose passion was the fire that kept them fighting. He looked at Lana, the spirit of their bond, whose quiet depth was their anchor in any storm. He saw the three most important people in his world, the three pillars of his new life. He knew what she meant. He knew what they were saying. And he felt it too, a truth so simple and so profound it settled every fear, every doubt, he had ever had. A slow, tired, but completely genuine smile spread across his face. He reached out his free hand, the one Mallow wasn't holding, and Lily took it without hesitation. "I know," he said, his voice still rough, but clear and certain. "I love you, too." The "too" was not an echo. It was an embrace. It was an answer that encompassed all three of them, a single, perfect chord that brought their song into harmony. In the quiet, sterile room, surrounded by the scars of a battle that had almost torn their world apart, they were finally, completely, whole. Chapter 8 End. Chapter 9. The Trials of Peace. The sun that rose over Mele Mele Island 6 months after the battle at the altar was a different sun. It was no longer a distant, hazy star in a sky tainted by fear, but a warm, brilliant, and welcome friend. It spilled golden light through the open windows of Professor Kukui's house, illuminating dust motes dancing in the air and casting long, peaceful shadows across the wooden floor. The only battle being waged this morning was over the last malasada on the breakfast table. "Absolutely not," Mallow said, planting her hands on her hips with mock severity, a tea towel slung over her shoulder. "That one is for the champion. Doctor's orders. He's still underweight." Ash, who was in the middle of reaching for the sugary treat, froze. He looked down at his own lean, toned physique. The coma had stripped him of what little spare weight he'd had, but months of Mallow's dedicated cooking had more than rectified that. "I am not underweight," he protested, though his grin betrayed his lack of real complaint. "My diagnosis stands," Mallow replied, snatching the malasada and placing it decisively on his plate. "Besides, you need the energy. We're sparring with Kiabe this afternoon, and I don't plan on carrying you home." Lana, sitting calmly at the table and sipping a glass of water, added without looking up, "I will. For a price." Ash chuckled. "And what's the price?" "The winner's portion of shave ice for a week," she stated, her lips twitching with the barest hint of a smile. From the living room couch, where she was surrounded by a sea of tablets and open books, Lily's voice drifted over. "A futile negotiation. Professor Kukui has already informed me that Sophocles has invented a new flavor at his family's shop. As acting treasurer of this household, I have already pre-allocated funds for a group taste testing expedition. Your individual claims are moot." Ash, Mallow, and Lana all looked at each other. Mallow sighed dramatically. "See, this is what happens when we let her manage the budget. Tyranny. It's called responsible fiscal planning," Lily called back, her voice laced with amusement. Ash took a large bite of the malasada, a comfortable, happy silence settling over them. This was their new life. In the months following Malama's retreat, the world had slowly, cautiously, returned to a semblance of normal. The kahunas, along with a deeply humbled and cooperative Gladian, had helped them manage the narrative. The official story was that a rogue ether faction had attempted to weaponize an ultra beast, and the new champion and his friends, celebrated heroes from the previous invasion, had stepped in to stop them. The details of their powers, of the Tapu's involvement, of Malama herself, remained a closely guarded secret, known only to a select few. They had become more than a team. They were a single, functioning entity. They lived and trained together, sometimes at the rebuilt Ether Paradise, but more often here, at Kukui's beach house, which had become their true home. They had fallen into a rhythm as natural as the tides. Mallow was the heart, ensuring they were fed, grounded, connected to the life around them. Lana was the calm, the deep, steadying current that saw through chaos and kept them centered. Lily was the mind, their strategist, their researcher, their voice of reason who managed their new, complicated lives. And Ash was the center of their gravity, the sun around which they orbited, his quiet strength and unwavering faith in them the force that held their small universe together. Their romantic bond, confessed in the sterile quiet of the medical bay, had blossomed not in grand, dramatic gestures, but in the small, everyday moments. It was in the way Mallow would instinctively know what food to make to soothe frayed nerves after a hard day. It was in the way Lana would silently appear with a cool drink for Ash during training, knowing he was overheating before he did. It was in the way Lily would leave her research to sit with them on the beach, simply to be present. And it was in the way Ash would look at each of them, a look of such profound, quiet love and gratitude that it needed no words. They were partners, in every sense of the word. This fragile, beautiful peace was shattered by the crunch of tires on the gravel outside. Professor Kukui entered, followed by a grim-faced Gladian. The easy morning atmosphere evaporated instantly. "Pack your bags," Gladian said, his tone leaving no room for argument. "We're moving you to the Paradise. Full lockdown." Ash stood up, his breakfast forgotten. "Gladian, what's going on?" "We have visitors," Kukui explained, his usual boisterous energy replaced by a deep-seated worry. He placed a datapad on the table. It showed a list of incoming flights to Haoli International Airport. Official diplomatic envoys. From Kanto, Johto, Hoenn, Sinnoh, Unova, Kalos, and Galar. They're all arriving within the next 48 hours. Lily was already on her feet, walking over from the couch. A coordinated delegation. That's not a courtesy call. That's an inquiry. Or an interrogation. Worse, Gladian said, crossing his arms. It's a summit, and we're the main topic. My contacts in the Galar League office say the other regions are concerned. The energy signatures from your battle with her didn't go unnoticed. They registered on every advanced sensor array on the planet. They saw a deity-level power event emanate from Alola, followed by the complete organizational collapse of a major regional power, the Wardens. They're not coming to talk. They're coming for answers. The implication was clear. The other, more established and powerful regions of the world were looking at Alola and seeing not a peaceful chain of islands, but a nation that had just developed a weapon of mass destruction. A weapon with Ash's face. They think we're a threat, Mallow breathed, the color draining from her face. They think Alola is a rogue state with 4 living, breathing, and unpredictable super weapons, Gladian corrected bluntly. And they want to know who has the launch codes. The next 2 days were a blur of tense preparation at Ether Paradise. The summit was to be held there, in the main conference hall. It was neutral ground, and more importantly, it was defensible. While Gladian and the Kahunas handled the official state-level preparations, the 4 of them held their own council of war in their private suite. "This is another battlefield," Ash said, pacing the common area. "But it's one where a thunderbolt won't do any good. This is your territory, Lily." Lily, who had been consuming every available file on the arriving delegates, looked up from her tablet. Her eyes were sharp, focused. The fear that Kratos had so easily exploited was gone, replaced by a formidable intellect. "It is. They'll try to frame this as a security issue, a matter of global stability. They'll want to know the source of our power, its limits, and who controls it. They'll likely propose some form of registration, or worse, an external oversight committee. We cannot allow that. This is Alola's power, to be used for Alola's defense. So we just stonewall them?" Mallow asked, leaning against the counter. "No," Lily said. "We manage them. We give them what they need. Reassurance. Without giving them what they want, control." She looked around at her partners, a plan already forming. Here's how we're going to do this. Mallow, you're our first line of defense. Mallow blinked. Me. But I'm no good at talking politics. This isn't about politics. It's about hospitality. It's a classic Alolan strategy. You will greet them. You will host a welcome feast so incredible, so overwhelmingly filled with the spirit of our islands, that you will disarm them before they even sit down at the table. You won't just be their host, you'll be their introduction to our culture. Remind them we are a people, not a weapon. Mallow's worried expression slowly morphed into a confident, determined grin. I can do that. Lily then turned to Lana. Lana, you will be in charge of security. You and your Pokemon will be a visible, but non-threatening, presence. You are not a guard. You are a statement. Your calm, your control, it will be the most intimidating thing in the room. You will show them that our power is not wild or chaotic. It is mastered. Lana gave a single, sharp nod, her understanding absolute. Finally, Lily looked at Ash. You are the champion. You are the reason they are here. You will sit at the head of the table, beside me. But you will not speak unless I ask you to. Ash didn't balk. He didn't argue. He trusted her completely. Okay. Your silence will be your power, Ash, she explained. They will try to provoke you, to test you, to see the unstable outsider Kratos told the world about. By remaining calm, by deferring to me as your chosen representative, you will show them something they don't expect: unity. Leadership. You will show them that this power is not held by one impulsive boy, but by a stable, cohesive council. She took a breath. I will be their opponent. But you will be the reason they lose the argument before it even begins. The day of the summit arrived, the air over Ether Paradise thick with the thrum of descending aircraft. The delegates were a formidable group. There was Chairman Akuma from the Kanto Johto Pokemon Association, a stern, elderly traditionalist. There was Dr. Aris Thorne from Sinnoh's Galactic Research Institute, a sharp, analytical woman whose gaze seemed to miss nothing. And most intimidating of all, there was Leon, the celebrated champion of Galar, attending as a representative of his league, his famous charisma backed by an aura of undeniable power. Their first stop was the Ether Conservatory, which Mallow had transformed. It was a wonderland of Alolan culture. The air was thick with the scent of roasted meat, sweet fruits, and 1,000 different flowers. Local musicians played soft, welcoming melodies. Mallow, dressed in a traditional lei and a warm, welcoming smile, greeted each delegate personally, offering them a taste of fresh squeezed pineapple juice and explaining the history of the dishes her family's restaurant had prepared. It was a masterful performance. She wasn't just serving food, she was serving them the very heart of Alola, a culture of generosity and life, not war. The delegates, prepared for a tense military briefing, were visibly caught off guard, their stern expressions softening slightly under the sheer force of her hospitality. The summit itself took place in the main conference hall, a large, circular room with a vast table in the center. Ash sat at the head, Pikachu on the floor beside him, a silent, watchful presence. Lily was at his right. Lana stood near the wall behind them, her Primarina a silent, elegant statue at her side. Chairman Akuma began, his tone that of a disappointed headmaster. Champion Ketchum, we are here today because the world is concerned. An unprecedented energy event, followed by a political coup, Alola has become a source of great instability. With respect, Chairman, Lily interjected smoothly, her voice calm and clear. Alola has become a source of stability. We dealt with a dangerous internal threat swiftly and effectively. The peace you see here is one we secured ourselves. Secured with what, precisely? Dr. Thorne cut in, her eyes glinting. Our readings detected power outputs comparable to the creation of a new star. That is not a regional security matter. That is a global one. We need to know the nature of this power. The nature of our power is intrinsically tied to the life force of Alola and our bond with the island guardians, Lily replied, choosing her words with surgical precision. It is defensive, not offensive. A weapon is a weapon, regardless of its stated purpose, Leon said, his voice less accusatory and more genuinely concerned. As a champion, you must understand the burden of power, Ash. Can you honestly say you have this celestial energy under control? He directed the question at Ash, a clear attempt to bypass Lily and test the unstable outsider. Ash met his gaze. The silence stretched, thick with tension. He did not speak. Instead, he gave a slow, deliberate nod towards Lily. The message was unmistakable. She speaks for us all. Lily answered for him. Control is our highest priority, Champion Leon. Which is why our power is not vested in a single individual, but in a balanced council of guardians, working in harmony. The debate raged for hours. They pushed. They prodded. They threatened sanctions and demanded inspections. Through it all, Lily was a rock, calmly and intelligently deflecting every argument, never giving an inch on Alola's sovereignty. Ash remained a silent mountain of strength at her side, his presence a powerful, unspoken statement of unity. The breaking point came when Chairman Akuma, frustrated by their unified front, finally lost his temper. This is unacceptable. You speak of councils and balance, but we see one boy with the power to level a continent. You leave us no choice but to insist on a demonstration, to assess this threat for ourselves. He slammed his hand on the table, and his aide, a young, overless man, took it as a cue. He hurled a sealed data slate towards Lily. The Galar League's formal demands. The aide shouted. The slate flew through the air, aimed directly at Lily's face. It never reached her. With a movement so small and fluid it was almost missed, Lana, from her position by the wall, made a soft, pinching motion with her fingers. The air in front of Lily's face seemed to thicken, to shimmer. The data slate stopped dead, hovering in midair an inch from her nose, as if frozen in amber. The room fell into a shocked silence. The only sound was the faint, high-pitched hum of the slate's internal electronics straining against the immense, invisible pressure holding it in place. Lana held the gesture for a long, pregnant moment, her calm, cold gaze sweeping across the faces of the stunned delegates. Then, with another gentle gesture, she guided the slate to land softly on the table in front of Lily. Not a single word was spoken, but the message was louder than any shout. This is our control. We can stop a threat before it even begins. Do not test us again. The tension in the room broke. The delegates exchanged uneasy glances. They had come expecting to intimidate a group of children who had stumbled into power. They had found a composed, unified, and unshakable government. Lily picked up the slate. Thank you, she said, her voice even. We will take your request under advisement. Now, if there are no further demonstrations, I believe Mallow has prepared a dessert course. The summit concluded an hour later, not with an agreement, but with a grudging, unspoken understanding. Alola would be left alone. For now. That night, back in the quiet of their suite, the exhaustion finally hit them. They had won. They had faced the world and protected their home. But as they sat together in the common area, a call came through on their private line. It was Professor Oak. His face, usually so warm and grandfatherly, was etched with worry. Ash, my boy, he began, his voice grave. I'm glad I reached you. Something strange has happened. 2 days ago, the entire Kanto power plant went dark. All power, reserve and primary, was drained in less than 10 seconds. Investigators found nothing but this. He held up a photo. It was a security image of a blank concrete wall inside the plant. Scratched into it, as if by a claw of pure shadow, was a single, ancient Alolan glyph. Lily's breath hitched. She recognized it from her research. It was a symbol for offering, or tribute. That's not all, Professor Oak continued, his expression darkening. I just received a call from Professor Birch in Hoenn. The Devon Corporation's main energy facility in Rustboro City, the same thing happened an hour ago. Only the energy drain was 5 times as powerful. The implication crashed down on them, washing away the satisfaction of their political victory. Malama was out there. She was wounded, and she was gathering power, healing herself by feeding on the technological hearts of other regions. The offerings weren't for a god. They were for herself. Ash looked at Lily, at Mallow, at Lana. The trial of peace was over. But the true war was just beginning. Chapter 9 End. Chapter 10. The Unending Journey. The silence that followed Professor Oak's call was heavier than any mountain, deeper than any ocean. The hard-won victory of the summit, the relief of having faced down the world and protected their home, dissolved into a bitter, metallic taste in their mouths. They had won a political battle, a trial of peace, only to be immediately confronted with the stark, terrifying truth of the real war. Malama had not been defeated. She had merely been inconvenienced. In their suite at Ether Paradise, the four of them stood around the datapad, the image of the shadow scratched glyph burned into their minds. It was no longer just a symbol. It was a declaration of intent, a promise of a darkness that would not be confined to one small, forgotten archipelago. She's feeding, Lily said, her voice a low, clinical whisper that did nothing to hide the tremor of fear beneath it. The energy signatures from Kanto and Hoenn, they're immense. She's not just healing. She's growing stronger. Evolving. Like a Pokemon eating a berry to restore its health, Mallow added, her arms wrapped tightly around herself. Only her berries are entire power plants. She won't stop with two, Lana stated, her gaze fixed on the world map displayed on a nearby monitor. Kanto. Hoenn. 2 points of light, now dimmed. She will move from region to region. A plague of shadows. By the time the world even realizes what is happening, she will be too powerful for anyone to stop. Ash said nothing. He walked to the panoramic window, looking out at the bright, peaceful Alolan Sea. He saw the Pony coastline in the distance, the place where they had almost lost everything. He felt the phantom echo of the fourfold power, the memory of a son being born inside him. They had done the impossible once. But Malama had survived. She had learned from her defeat. Now, she was playing on a global scale, while they were confined to their islands. The weight of it all, the sheer, crushing scale of what was to come, threatened to pull him under. But then he felt a hand on his shoulder. Mallow. He turned and saw the other two were there as well, forming a familiar, unbreakable circle around him. They were not looking at him with fear or expectation. They were looking at him with the same quiet, unwavering strength he drew from them. So what's the plan, champion? Mallow asked, her voice soft, but with an edge of her old, defiant fire. He didn't have a plan. Not yet. But looking at them, he had a purpose. We don't wait for her to come back to us, he said, his voice ringing with a newfound, grim resolve. We go to her. We hunt her down. The decision was not a choice, it was an inevitability. When they presented their intent to Gladion and the Kahunas, there was no argument, only a solemn, heavy acceptance. Alola's problem had become the world's, and the Guardians of Alola were now its only viable solution. You cannot go as fugitives or a vigilante strike force, Hala said, his voice resonating with ancient authority. You must go as what you are. You must go as heroes, with the full, unified blessing of your people. And so, one last ceremony was planned. It was held at the Manalo Stadium, rebuilt and gleaming under the afternoon sun, every single one of its tens of thousands of seats filled. The mood was not the wild, explosive joy of Ash's League victory. It was something deeper, more profound. It was a gathering of a nation to formally recognize and send forth its sworn protectors. The four of them stood on a raised dais in the center of the field, dressed in simple, formal white attire designed by Lily. The four Kahunas stood before them. And above, circling the open roof of the stadium, the four Tapu materialized, their cries a divine chorus that sent a shiver of awe through the massive crowd. Hala, acting as speaker for the Kahunas and the gods themselves, raised his staff. For generations, we have been protected by the spirits of our islands, he boomed, his voice magically amplified to fill the stadium. Today, we recognize the human spirits who have become their partners, their chosen vessels. He approached Ash. Ash Ketchum. You came to us an outsider, but you have become our heart. For your courage, for your strength, for your unbreakable spirit, we name you champion of Alola, the sword of the sun. Olivia approached Mallow. Mallow Vodello. Daughter of Akala. Your heart is the soil from which our strength grows. We name you guardian of life, the body of our will. Nanu, for once looking completely serious, stood before Lana. Lana Swearin. Daughter of the sea. Your calm is the depth that holds our fury. We name you guardian of spirit, the soul of our purpose. Finally, Hapu stood before Lily. Lily Ether. You have forged your own path from shadow into light. Your wisdom is the beacon that guides us. We name you guardian of the mind, the shield of our people. Hala raised his staff one final time. Together, they are more. They are the guardians of Alola. Our hope. Our future. The roar that erupted from the crowd was a physical force, a tidal wave of love, gratitude, and hope. It was a sound that infused them with a strength that rivaled the divine power they had once held. It was the collective power of their entire nation, a blessing and a mandate. Ash looked at Lily, Mallow, and Lana, and he saw their own awe and resolve reflected in their eyes. They were no longer four kids bound by fate. They were an institution, a legend in the making. Later that evening, as the sun began its slow descent, painting the sky in fiery strokes of orange and purple, they found themselves on the quiet beach behind Kukui's house. The roar of the crowd was gone, replaced by the gentle sigh of the waves. Their formal white clothes had been exchanged for their familiar, comfortable attire. This was their last moment of peace, a final, stolen breath before the plunge. They sat on the sand, not speaking, simply watching the sun melt into the horizon. The weight of their new titles, of the journey that lay before them, was immense. Ash finally broke the silence, though he didn't look away from the ocean. Ready for a new journey? He asked, the question quiet, simple, yet holding the weight of the world. Lily, who was sitting beside him, tracing patterns in the sand, smiled softly. We've got your back, Ash. Always. Her voice held the calm certainty that had faced down the world's leaders. Mallow, who was skipping a stone across the water's surface, grinned, a flash of her old, irrepressible spirit. Of course we're ready. Someone has to make sure you eat properly on the road. Kanto food is so bland. Her pragmatism was a comforting anchor. Lana said nothing. She simply stood, her eyes fixed on the darkening horizon, on the path that lay across the sea. She gave a single, determined nod. It was all she needed to say. Her resolve was their compass. Ash looked at them, his family, his partners, the three parts of his own soul. His heart was so full of love for them it felt like it might burst. A low hum broke the evening quiet. A sleek, black ether vessel, larger and more advanced than any they had seen before, descended from the sky, hovering just off the coast. A ramp lowered onto the beach. Gladian stood at the top, his expression grim but resolute. It was time. Ash stood up, brushing the sand from his pants. He held out his hands. Lily took one, Mallow the other. Lana came and stood beside them, her shoulder brushing against Mallow's. Their Pokémon, Pikachu, Sarina, Primarina, and Snowy, gathered at their feet, a small, loyal army ready to follow them to the ends of the earth. Together, a single, unified line of four, they turned away from the setting sun and began to walk towards the ship, their shadows stretching long behind them. They were leaving their home, their childhood, their old lives. They were walking into the coming night, towards an enemy who fed on stars. But they were not afraid. They were the guardians of Alola. And their journey, the unending journey, had just begun. Chapter 10 End.